Hey guys, I hope you're doing great today, and I would like to welcome you to our AZ-900 Fundamentals Azure Fundamentals course. And you can see on my screen that I have already created all these chapters, and I want you to get certified for Azure AZ-9 Fundamentals certification, which is the most basic and fundamental and one of the most easiest certifications for getting started with Azure. So if you're looking forward to learn about Azure Cloud Platform, Azure services, then this full course, I would say it is for you. And I would highly recommend that you must follow me on this course. And you can see that on my screen, I have a Google Drive and I have already created all these chapters. So this video, you can take it as an introduction to our AZ-900 Fundamentals course. And we are going to cover each and every concept of Azure. What is cloud computing? What is Azure? What are the services that Azure provides? What is Azure physical infrastructure? What is Azure management infrastructure? And you can see Azure compute services, networking, storage services, and other services are covered in this course one by one, so that when you are up for the AZ-900 fundamentals exam, I hope that you will pass it without any issues. So guys, that's the overview of this course, AZ-900 Azure Fundamentals Certification course. And today we are going to start with our chapter number 1. What is cloud computing? So I hope that most of you guys know about or might have heard about cloud computing. What is cloud computing? So I just wanted to have a quick overview of it in this chapter. So make sure that you subscribe to DevOps Molvi. Let's get started. I will turn the slideshow on, and this is our chapter number 1. And make sure that you stay tuned with the whole playlist. I will create a dedicated playlist for AZ-900 Fundamentals course. And what is cloud computing? So each chapter, by the way, this is the path, or this is the way that I am following in this series. Each chapter will have a headline, a major headline that is actually the conclusion of that specific service, that specific term. So today, the major headline of what is cloud computing is that cloud computing is the delivery of computing services over the internet. That is actually the main theme of cloud computing. That cloud computing delivers compute resources over the internet, and you can manage all those resources anywhere in the world. That is actually the beauty of cloud computing. We can manage our virtual machines, storage buckets, networks, virtual private clouds, whatever. We can manage them from anywhere in the world with cloud platform like AWS, Azure, or Google Cloud Platform. So this is actually the cloud computing. Cloud computing is the on demand, by the way. If I want to add, it is the on demand delivery of computing services over the internet. So, what was going on before the cloud when there was no cloud computing? The organizations relied on premise systems with data and applications stored on physical servers. Physical servers were there in each organizations, and each company, each IT company, software houses were having their own physical servers in their physical racks in their office premises. Okay, so in their physical premises, and those servers were having the applications running on them, the databases or the networks. So that's what happening before the cloud. There was no concept of resources over the internet, and the organizations had their servers infrastructure on their on-prem data centers managed by their IT teams. I worked for a company where we had a physical data center. So I saw the data centers, the racks, the servers that have been mounted in that data center. And we were the guys that were managing the networks uptime and monitoring of all the systems that were running on that on-prem data center. So there was limited flexibility and scalability. For instance, if a server was having 32 GB of RAM and upgrading it to 64 was a hectic job. I mean, we have to turn the server off and then we have to pull it out from the rack and then we have to upgrade the RAM. So that was kind of mess and it was really hard to upscale the servers and there was no flexibility just like we have now in cloud computing. We just have to take the snapshot of any virtual machine for backup. We just have to turn off the virtual machine, resize, and we just turn it on back and our server is upgraded with the upgraded resources. So that's how simple it is. And that's not was the case before the cloud. The hardest part was to mount new servers in the racks. Just like I told you that we have to physically mount and the servers in the racks. Now, what is cloud computing for beginners? If you are a student and you are new to cloud computing, then what is cloud computing? What cloud computing means? It means that we can store our data and access software over the internet instead of our own computer. When we are building resources over the cloud, it means that we can access all those resources from the internet. Whether I am in Canada, from India, in Pakistan, in USA. So I can access my account. For instance, if it is an Azure account, I can access it from my laptop, from the internet, anywhere. So it means that I can manage all those resources from anywhere in the world as long as I have the internet access. Okay. Over the internet means a cloud provider, just like Azure. Having our resources and data over the internet means we can access them anywhere, anytime. And the cloud resources mean virtual machines, storage, databases, AI and ML models, and Internet of Things. These are the key services that we are going to cover them one by one in this course. So these are actually the cloud resources. If you are spinning up a virtual machine over Azure, it means that you are creating a resource on Azure, right? So these are the resources, and the beauty of cloud computing is that you can access your resources, you can manage them, you can delete them, modify them, upscale, downscale from the internet anywhere, anytime. So that is actually the cloud computing for beginners. I hope that you have a clear concept of what is cloud computing. Now, again, I am going to describe the actual definition of cloud computing. This is actually the actual definition that I took from the internet, that what is cloud computing. If you are asked to define what is cloud computing, then we can define it. Cloud computing is the on-demand delivery of IT resources. Now, what does on-demand means? That when I need those resources, I get them. And when I don't need those resources, I should delete them. And I am charged. I have to give the payment. I have to give the money for the resources that I have only used. Okay. Now, this is actually the complete phenomenon, the complete idea of on-demand resources. When I need them, I should get them. When I don't need them, I should remove them and I should only pay for the resources that I have used. So those resources can be servers, storage, databases, network, software, analytics, all these services. Every cloud platform now provides all these resources, all these services and intelligence over the internet with pay-as-you-go pricing. Now, this is actually the core theme behind cloud computing. Pay-as-you-go. Pay-as-you-go. That you have to pay for the resources that you have used. You don't have to pay any extra charges for any of the resources that you have not used. All right. There are two actually major terms in cloud computing. You should keep them in your mind. One, on demand resources, that when I need those resources, and pay as you go. I have to pay for the resources that I use. So, this is what cloud computing. Pay as you go is the major pricing model in cloud computing, right? Pay as you go means only pay for the resources you have used. That's it. This is actually cloud computing. For instance, if I am going to launch a virtual machine for the next 2 days, so I will be going to pay for the resources for that virtual machine for only 2 days. It can be $1, it can be $2. So it depends on the size of the virtual machine. And I don't have to pay for the whole month. This is actually the pay as you go model. So, what are the world's leading cloud platforms? I have listed a couple of those cloud platforms that are now leading the world. Okay. And among Microsoft Azure, AWS, and also Google Cloud Platform, Oracle Cloud, Alibaba Cloud, IBM Cloud, Linode, and DigitalOcean. Let me know in the comments if you have worked with any of these cloud platforms before, or you have heard about any of these in your graduation or in your literature survey. Okay. So now, guys, what are the cloud models? So basically, there are four cloud models. Don't worry, I will explain each cloud model. And as for the slide, you can see we have a public cloud. It means that it is available publicly. So as the name says, public cloud, it means that this cloud is publicly available for the whole world. Anyone can use them. They have to just pay for the services. For instance, Azure, AWS, GCP, these are all public clouds. Now, what is a private cloud? An organization which builds the cloud on its own data center. Now, this is actually a private cloud and it is not publicly accessible. It is for that organization. Private cloud is isolated, okay? It has nothing to do with the public and over the internet. Whether if that company wants, then it is the choice of that company and it is dedicated for that organization. This is the answer. So that's why it is known as a private cloud, because that IT company builds for its own resources, for its own purposes, for its own data. So that is why it is isolated from the internet, from the rest of the world. That's why it is known as private cloud. And what is a hybrid cloud? It is the mixture of public and private cloud. So it becomes a hybrid cloud. An IT company which is using both clouds is, we can say, it is the example of hybrid cloud. Like that company is using Azure for virtual machines, for storage, and it is at the same time using private cloud for its sensitive data. Now, this becomes a hybrid cloud. And what is multi cloud? As the name says, if any company is using AWS, Azure, GCP, Linode, DigitalOcean for their services, it means that this is a multi cloud example. This company is using multiple cloud platforms for its data and services. And guess what? It happens in a lot of the companies. They use G Suite for Google Workspace, Google Cloud, and they can use S3 for storage. They can use virtual machines on Azure. So this is the example of using multi-cloud. All right, guys, now this is important. Okay, what are the cloud service types? And we have actually three major service types. Infrastructure as a service. The first one is IaaS, infrastructure as a service. And in this cloud service type, we just purchase the basic computing resources from a cloud provider. Like I have given the example so that your concept is clear. If I am spinning up virtual machines on Azure, it means that I am using this cloud platform as infrastructure as a service. So this is the example. Now, platform as a service, purchase a complete and ready to use cloud environment. Like for instance, Azure Cosmos DB. It is a fully managed database service. Now, this is actually a platform as a service, cloud service type. And software as a service, the example is Azure DevOps for deploying applications. And in software as a service, we purchase a fully managed cloud service. Now, it is actually managed by Azure. Let me share the example with this diagram. Now, in order to understand the importance and the difference between each service type, this is my favorite image. Okay, you can see this is on-prem and it is full dark blue. And dark blue means that customer, me. Okay, if you treat yourself as a customer, it means that on-prem, I have to manage each and everything. On-prem, I have to manage everything, my servers, my networks, my routers, my databases, so on. But now we are shifting towards cloud platform. And in infrastructure as a service, there are some points, there are some services that are managed by me, by the customer. And you can see this is being managed by Microsoft. The light blue boxes. You can see I have these light blue boxes, and this is managed by Microsoft. So, for instance, if I have a virtual machine, it means that uh, the nodes, network, and data center, it will be managed by Microsoft. Okay. And after that, the applications, control, operating systems, IAM, accounts, everything, I will manage all those stuff. Okay. So now the responsibilities have been divided. There are something that I have to manage, and there is something that Microsoft will manage for me. Microsoft is responsible for the underlying hardware, for the network, for the data center. Now, if I have launched a virtual machine, I am responsible. I can choose the operating system that I want. I can choose the network security, security groups, or virtual network. I can run the applications of my choice. So you can see that now this customer, now this is the customer, this is me. I'm managing virtual machines. So that's totally my choice to run the operating system, the applications, the networks on all those virtual machines. Now, guys, in platform as a service, you can see that the responsibilities have been divided further. So now you can see in platform as a service, that's how the responsibilities have been divided. Now, in platform as a service, it is the choice of Microsoft Azure to give to launch the operating system. So we have some partial responsibilities like network controls, applications, identity, and directory infrastructure. So this is actually, it means that some of the responsibilities are owned by the customers and some of the responsibilities are owned by Azure. And finally, in software as a service, you can see a lot of stuff is managed by Microsoft, and we are just responsible for the information, data, and devices and accounts. So most of the things have are being managed by Microsoft Azure. So that's how we can understand the shared responsibility model after going through this diagram. So I hope that it is now clear to you that there are some responsibilities on the customer and there are some responsibilities on Microsoft Azure, and there are some shared responsibilities as well, like you can see in platform as a service and software as a service. So finally, by cloud, And you can say that these are some of the features of cloud computing. So there are no upfront costs. There is no need to purchase and manage costly infrastructure. And we have the ability to pay for more resources when we need them. And we also have the ability to stop paying for the resources that we no longer need. So these are some of the major benefits or features or advantages of cloud computing. And that's it in this lecture today. I hope that you have a clear idea of cloud computing models like public cloud, private cloud, hybrid, and multi cloud. And also, we have discussed the cloud service type like infrastructure, platform, or software as a service. And we also discussed the responsibility model. In the next chapter, we are going to learn about what is Azure. So make sure that you subscribe and stay tuned for this AZ-900 fundamentals course. See you in the next lecture. Have a good one. Bye. Hey guys, I hope you're doing great today. This is our second chapter, chapter number 2 of our AZ-900 Azure Fundamentals course. In the previous chapter, we discussed the course overview, what we are going to learn in this course, and also we discussed about what is cloud computing, why we need cloud computing, what are the cloud computing models and cloud computing service types. Today we are officially going to learn about what is Azure. So let's get started and make sure that you have subscribed DevOps Molvi. This is our today's main headline, major headline. We are going to discuss one major headline, which is actually the conclusion of that lecture. So today's lecture is about Microsoft Azure, and we know that Microsoft Azure is the second largest cloud provider in the world. It is the second largest cloud provider. The first one is, by the way, AWS, for your knowledge. So Microsoft, as per market share, it is the second largest cloud provider in the world. And ChatGPT runs on Azure. So I was just solving my problems, my issues on ChatGPT, and one day I asked ChatGPT that, where are you running? And also I asked that, are you running on Azure? So ChatGPT replied, you can see that, yes, OpenAI's model, including me, ChatGPT, are hosted on cloud platforms like Microsoft Azure. Azure provides the infrastructure and computational power necessary to run large scale models like mine, ensuring responsiveness and scalability. So it means that OpenAI, ChatGPT, they are all running on Microsoft Azure. So now we know the importance of Microsoft Azure. It is the leading cloud platforms in the world, and AI based model like ChatGPT is also running on Azure. So guys, now what is Azure? Azure is the cloud platform of Microsoft. We know that. That's why it is known as Microsoft Azure. And it is a private and public cloud platform that helps developers and IT professionals build, deploy, and manage applications. It is the combination of both cloud platforms. I mean, it is also a private and public cloud. If you want to buy its private cloud, you can. And if we want to use it as a public cloud, we can use it publicly as well. And it is a cloud platform for developers and IT engineers so that we can deploy and manage our applications on Azure. Azure offers all types of cloud services, including infrastructure, platform, and software as a services. We have already discussed in our last chapter about infrastructure, platform, and software as a service. In infrastructure, the example was virtual machines. In platform, the example was Cosmos DB. And in software as a service, the example was Azure DevOps, which is a software as a service by Azure. Also, Azure offers robust security features to protect data and application. Azure is one of the most secure cloud platforms, and it also offers security features so that our data sensitive information is always secured. So guys, do you want to get started with Azure? Well, I have a great news for you. So if you have a student email account, okay, a university email address, then you can start learning Azure for free using Azure free student account. Okay, this is Azure free student account, and I have also mentioned what this account offers for you. The Azure free student account offer includes free access to certain Azure services for 12 months, for 1 year, a credit to use in the first 1 year. Azure gives us credit, free access to certain software developer tools for your projects. And also, the Azure free account is an offer for students that gives $100 credit and free developer tools. Also, we can sign up without a credit card. That is actually the most special thing about Azure free student account, that we don't need any credit card to sign up. Most of the students, being students, they don't have any credit card. The only mandatory information is your email address, your university email address, to sign up for free Azure student account. All right, guys, now what is an Azure resource hierarchy? So, Azure resource hierarchy actually starts from the basic building blocks of resources. Now you can see this is virtual machine, web application, virtual network, database, and then each resource is grouped into a resource group. Okay, I'm starting from the bottom so that you can have a clear understanding that our resources are actually the basic components, the building blocks like virtual machines, storage accounts, virtual networks, and they are grouped together in a resource group. A single resource group can have multiple resources at one time, or a single resource group can have one resource at one time. And each resource group is attached to a subscription like free trial, like pay as you go subscription. And this subscription is actually attached or bound to an Azure account. So now, starting from the top hierarchy, you can see that whenever I sign up on Azure, I get an Azure account. And if I am signing up for a free student account for a free trial, then it means that I will get a free subscription with Azure credit. And I can use this free subscription to create resource group. And in resource group, we are going to create our actual resources like virtual machines, virtual networks, web applications, databases, Azure Kubernetes clusters, or Azure container instances. So this is actually Azure resource hierarchy. Our Azure account, it will have a subscription, and then a subscription can have one or more resource groups, and then a resource group can have one or more resources. Every resource is going to be created in a resource group. Keep that in mind. All right, guys, now what is Azure physical infrastructure? In physical infrastructure, we are going to discuss about the Azure region. Azure region, it is actually the geographical location, physical location. A region is a geographical area on Earth, okay? And it contains one or more data centers that are networked together. Each region can have multiple availability zones. An availability zone can have one or more data centers. When we deploy a resource, we have to choose the region of our choice. We can choose from Asia, from India, from US, from Europe. So all these are Azure regions. Azure currently has more than 38 regions in the world. For instance, West US 3 is a region in Arizona. Okay, now I have shared the example of a region. This is US West 3 is a region in Arizona. Also now, what is an availability zone? Availability zone is a physical separate data center with an Azure region. So it means that one Azure region can have multiple availability zones. These are actually the data centers which have the servers. An availability zone can have one or more data centers, and also availability zone is set up to be an isolation boundary for security purposes. If one zone goes down, the other continues working. That is actually the beauty of having multiple availability zones in a single region. In case of any disaster or power failure or network failure, if one zone goes down, the other one picks up the load and our services remain operational all the time. And also, availability zones are connected to high speed private fiber optic networks. For they are actually having the same networks, they are connected to each other, and that is why if a single zone fails, the other one takes the load. All right, guys, now you can see I have this up an overview, a general picture of an Azure region with three availability zones. Now you can see I have this zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, and let's suppose that this is Arizona and this is our region US West 3, and this region has three availability zones, and all these availability zones are connected with each other in case of any failure. For instance, if availability zone goes down, 2 and 3 will be operational and they will share the load. That's how it works. So each region has one or more availability zones that are connected with each other through high speed optical fibers. Now, guys, this is actually a snapshot of creating a virtual machine. And I just wanted to share that that's how we have the choice to give the region and zone. Now, in this diagram, you can see that I am selecting Asia Pacific region. Okay, and I have selected East Asia as my region. So my virtual machine is going to be launched in this region. Also, I can see other regions like East US, South Central US, West US 2, West US 3. So all of these are regions, and we have the choice to launch our virtual machine in the region of our choice. And also, guys, we have region peering. Just like we discussed that each availability zone is connected with the other availability zone through high-speed optical fibers. Similarly, if a region is within 300 miles, it means that region 1 will be connected with region 2. As I have told you here, that most Azure regions are paired with another region within the same geography at least 300 miles. So it means that US West 2 and West US 3, they should be connected with each other if they are within 300 miles. Example is Azure regions are paired in Europe or in USA within that mileage, okay, within 300 miles. And if a region is in a pair is affected by a natural disaster, services would automatically fail over to the other region in its region pair. For instance, we have two regions. If region A goes down, everything is shifted to region B. Now you can see in this diagram about region pairing, I have this Azure region 1 and this is Azure region 2, and within 300 miles you can see that they are connected with each other with really super fast high speed optical fibers. So I hope that you have a clear idea about regions and region pairing. Just like when we build a network for 2 or 3 virtual machines, if they are on the same network, it means that they are connected with each other. And similarly, when we pair the regions, it means that they are connected with each other. One of the major advantages of this region pairing is that in case of any region failure, for instance, if region A goes down, it means that everything, traffic, customers' applications, customer data would be available on region B, and they will not face any failure or their services going down. So that's how region pairing works, each region is connected with the other region within 300 miles. All right, guys, that's the end of today's chapter. We have discussed what is Azure. We also have a quick overview of Azure resource hierarchy, and also we discussed about Azure physical infrastructure like regions, availability zones, and region pairing. In the next chapter, we are going to discuss about Azure management infrastructure. Most of the concepts would be revised. So I will see you in our next chapter number 3 of Azure management infrastructure. Make sure to subscribe DevOps Molvi. Have a good one. Bye. Hey guys, I hope you're doing great today. This is our third chapter of our Azure Fundamentals course. And today we are going to talk about Azure management infrastructure. Guys, if you have watched my previous lecture, you know that we have already covered Azure's physical infrastructure. In physical infrastructure, we discussed about regions, we discussed about availability zones, data centers, and how region pairing works in Azure for high availability. And today we are going to learn what are the components, what is there in Azure management infrastructure. So before we get started, make sure that you subscribe DevOps Molvi. I really appreciate your support. So what is today's major headline? As per every lecture, we used to conclude the major headline of each chapter. So today I would like to share that Azure Management Infrastructure helps users manage, monitor, and optimize their cloud resources. That's what Azure Management Infrastructure is all about. It helps users like me or users like you to manage and monitor our resources. But before that, guys, we need to learn about a cloud resource. What is exactly a cloud resource? So let's proceed ahead. And here it is. What is an Azure resource? Anything we create, provision, deploy is a resource. That's how simple it is. Anything we create, like a virtual machine, a virtual network, a storage account. All these are resources on Azure. A virtual machine on Azure is a resource, a database is a resource. A resource is the basic building block of Azure. Okay, that's what the most important thing that we use to launch. We are going to launch a virtual machine. It means that we are going to build a resource on Azure cloud. Okay, we already have discussed the Azure hierarchy in our previous chapter, in which we discussed that Azure resource is the basic building block of Azure cloud. So Azure resource mean a virtual machine, a storage account, a virtual network. Okay, and what is a resource group? As the name says, if we group multiple resources into a single group, this is known as a resource group. A resource group can have multiple resources, but it is not mandatory. A resource group can have only one resource as well. So, in other words, a resource group is the collection of multiple resources. It means that a resource group can have 10 or 20 or 30 virtual machines. A resource group can have 10 storage accounts at the same time, 2 virtual networks at one time. So that is collectively known as a resource group. When we create a resource, we have to place it in a resource group. That's how the hierarchy works in Azure. And a resource group can have multiple resources, but a resource like a VM can only be in one resource group at one time. Okay, so it means that one resource group can have multiple resources at one time, but we cannot replicate one resource in multiple resource groups with the same configurations, with the same specifications in multiple resource groups. Okay, all right, guys, now let's repeat the resource hierarchy in Azure again. You can see we have these building blocks. Okay, virtual machine, virtual network, application, database, and all these are grouped into a resource group. You can see A resource group can have multiple resources. A resource group can have only one resource at one time. And each resource group is attached to a subscription. A subscription can be a free trial, okay, or pay as you go subscription. And that subscription is actually bound to your Azure account, okay. So that's how the hierarchy works. We log in our Azure account, we have a subscription. For a free student account, we can enjoy the free tier, okay. And after that, each subscription can have one or more resource groups, and at the end we create resources in every resource group. So that's how the hierarchy works. It is very important to understand. And there is still one thing that is missing, and we are going to discuss it in our next slides. So, what is a subscription? In order to create resources on Azure, we need a subscription. Okay, a subscription can be a free trial, a subscription can be pay as you go. Subscription is used to charge us. A subscription is used for billing actually. For instance, if I am launching 10 or 20 virtual machines in a single subscription, that subscription is used to charge me. That subscription is used for billing. And a subscription provides us with authenticated and authorized access to Azure products and services. I can use all Azure products in a subscription. A subscription is mandatory, and Azure subscription is linked with the Azure account for billing, just like we discussed in the earlier slide. And a single subscription can have multiple resource groups. That's what we already discussed as well. And the examples of a subscription is free or pay as you go, or we can create our custom subscriptions as well. Now, in my account, I have already I have already used the free subscription. Now I'm being charged with pay as you go. So pay as you go means that you have to pay for the resources you use. Okay, this is the simplest concept of cloud, that you have to pay for only those resources that you use. All right, I hope that you have a clear idea about the subscription now. And it is still continued. You can see the recommended practice is to create separate subscriptions according to the environment so that we have a better idea of our billing. You can see in this diagram, I have one single Azure account and I have 3 subscriptions, each subscription with its own name. Like we have dev subscription, test subscription, and production subscription. So for instance, if I have dev virtual machines, I will use the dev subscription. Or I have the virtual machines for my testing purposes, then I can launch my virtual machines for QA in the test subscription. And production subscription is obviously used for my production environment where I am serving my applications for the customers. So it is a recommended practice that we must categorize our subscriptions like dev, QA, production, sandbox, so that we have a better idea of our infrastructure on the cloud. So this is actually the key part of our today's lecture. What is an Azure management group? So we already have an idea about a resource group, a subscription, but on top of that, we have a management group. All right. A management group is actually the top portion of Azure resource management hierarchy. And we can use Azure management groups to attach to assign our back. Role-based access at the management group level means that all subscriptions, resource groups, and resources underneath that our management group would also inherit those permissions. Let me explain it more with this diagram. Actually, it is a bit confusing. What is a management group? Now you can see I have a root management group. Now you can see in root management group, I have 3 further management groups for each department. Now I have a human resource management group, I have an IT management group, a marketing management group, and all these management groups have their subscriptions. And in the subscription, we have resource groups and then we have resources. So, this is actually the top level hierarchy in any Azure account of any IT organization. Now, let's suppose that it is one big IT company with a lot of departments, with a lot of teams. So, in order to manage all those teams efficiently, we must create management groups. Now, in this example, you can see that I have three major departments. I have categorized, I have created management groups. These are actually sub management groups. All right. These are sub management groups under the root management groups. And each management group is attached with a subscription. And then in subscription, we have resource groups and then we have resources. So that's how management groups works. So, what is the benefit of using a management group? The benefit is awesome because if I attach one single policy with this management group, it means that it would be attached to everything underneath this management group. Let me repeat it again because it is really important to understand. If I attach any role, administrator role, or any policy with this management group, so it means that it would be applied by default to everything under that management group. It would be applied with production, with Geo Region 1, Geo Region 2, and all the subscriptions under this management group. So that is actually the purpose of creating a management group. We can apply policies, we can apply our back role-based access. Don't worry, we are going to discuss it as well in our upcoming lecture. So the purpose and the core function of management group is to manage the resources as well, but also we can apply policies, roles to a single management group, and it would be inherited in every sub management group or resource group or subscriptions, and also with the resources. So that is what I have written here, that assigning Azure R back at the management group level means that all subscriptions, resource groups, and resources underneath that management group also inherit all those permissions. For instance, if this IT group has the full administrator role attached to it, it means that all the sub-management groups and subscriptions and resource groups will have that administrator access. So that's how we can use management groups to attach policies or backs, and those policies and role-based access is inherited underneath every management group. So that is the overview, a general overview of a management group in Azure. And also, guys, there is also one important thing to understand. We can directly attach subscriptions to the root management group. And obviously, it is understood that the top management of that IT company will have the access to the root management group. The IT department will have the access to the IT resources, and that's how we can organize our infrastructure, we can secure our infrastructure, and also we can use proper authorization and authentication so that any employee in our IT company can use the resources on Azure. So that's it for today's lecture, guys. I hope that you have a clear picture of Azure Management Group. We discussed what is a resource. A resource can be a virtual machine. And we have already covered resource groups in our previous lecture of Azure Physical Infrastructure. We discussed subscription, which is used for billing and also for authorization and authentication. That's how Azure charges us. Azure uses subscription for billing, for charging its customers. And after that, we discuss the key important part of Azure Management Group. Azure Management Group is actually the top level hierarchy in Azure, and that's how we must use this hierarchy for proper and organized infrastructure on Azure. So, uh, I will see you in our next lecture of Azure Portal, and we are going to navigate and see how Azure Portal looks like. I will see you in the next lecture. Have a good one. Bye. All right, guys, I hope you're doing great today. This is our chapter number 4 of our AZ-900 fundamentals course. And today, this would be actually a lab. And we are going to see how Azure Portal looks like. So let's get started. And before we get started, make sure that you subscribe DevOps Molvi. And what is actually an Azure portal? So this is a simple definition of Azure portal, that it is a unified management console to build and run resources in the cloud. All right. So if you want to run virtual machines, if you want to run Azure Kubernetes service or Azure container instances or any service for AI, for data, for analytics, how can possibly you interact with Azure? So there are actually a couple of ways that we can use to build our resources on Azure. One of the most frequent ways of interacting with Azure is to use Azure Portal. I will also mention other ways as well. So Azure Portal is a UI, a user interface, and honestly saying that it is a fantastic user interface by Azure, so that we can build, we can manage, we can create our resources, our accounts on Azure. So that's what Azure Portal is used for. And the other ways to interact with Azure are also, I will mention those. The one is Azure Portal, the others are Azure CLI, we can install it. And also we can use PowerShell, which is also a Microsoft product. And also we can use Azure SDKs, software development kits, that can be used with other languages for integration like Java or Node or Express. So these are the 4 ways to interact with Azure. We can use any of these to build resources on cloud, on Azure. So the most frequent is definitely Azure Portal. We have Azure CLI, PowerShell, and SDKs. So guys, I have already opened the portal of Azure for you, and the link is portal.azure.com. We can use this URL to see how an Azure portal looks like. So that's how it looks like. And by the way, if you want to sign up for a free account, we can see there is a link, create your Azure free account or pay as you go. So I will click on it and it will redirect me try Azure for free page. And if I click on this Azure, try Azure for free, after all, we are going to try it for free. So I can use any other account and I can click on create one. Okay. No account. For instance, if I am new to it, though I have one account, and I can click on create account. And from there, we need an Outlook email address or live email address, abc@live.com or abc@outlook.com. For instance, if I write DevOps Molvi 123 at outlook.com, and if I click on next, I can set my password here. For instance, if I set any random password, I'm doing this just for you guys since I have one already and it is running for me. So I will click on next, and after that I will solve this puzzle, and it is saying that okay. Oh, yes. I will submit. It is a success, and now I will be redirected to create an account on Azure. So, by the way, before we proceed, I just want to let you know that you need an email address, you need a password, you have to verify your email address, and for billing, you need a credit card. Okay. And if you are from Pakistan, then you can use SadaPay or NayaPay to use those cards to sign up on Azure. And if you are from India, you can use any fintech card. Okay. That is actually a virtual debit card from MasterCard or Visa. You can use those cards to sign up on Azure as well, because it is important we have to use credit card since Azure initiates a test transaction of $1. So you must have around 300, 400 rupees in Pakistan, or one equivalent amount of dollar in your Indian account. After that, you can see I have to fulfill all these requirements: my country, first name, middle name, last name, and your email address. This is important. And my phone. And phone is required because you are going to be verified, right? You are going to get a text or a call with a code that is for a security. And after that, just give the address. And once you give the address, you have to check all these boxes. The final process would be identity verification by card. You have to give your card number, CVC, and its expiry. And once your email is verified, you can sign up on Azure. So once you are signed up, you can run portal.azure.com to use Azure account, and it's free tier. Since I have already used the free tier, now the subscription that I have is pay as you go. So guys, this is how Microsoft Azure portal looks like. You can search any service from here. For instance, if I search virtual machines, and I can immediately go to that specific service. So the navigation is really simple and straightforward. And from here, I can create Azure virtual machine. I will click on it. So you can see the user interface. To be honest, I just love it. Now, if I want to create a virtual machine, I have to give the specifications, though we are going to cover it in detail in our compute services. I just want to let you know that that's how we can create resources on Azure. So we can also navigate from here. Like if I want to go to storage accounts, I can navigate from my favorites, since these are the most frequently used services. So these are given under favorites. After that, guys, if you want to see all the services, then I have this all services option here. If an I have clicked on it, and now we can see hundreds of Azure services. You can see these are AI plus machine learning services. If you are going to use these services, you can use any of these, and they are categorized under AI plus machine learning. And after that, analytics. So the services as Azure DevOps, we are going to use compute services like availability sets, host groups, images, SSH keys, Azure Virtual Desktop, virtual machines. So all these services are categorized and listed under compute. So as Azure DevOps, we are going to use the compute services. Please don't get overwhelmed with the large amount of services that Azure is providing. Do I have to learn each and every service? No, because every service has its own purpose. If you are an AI engineer, then definitely you are going to use the AI services provided by Azure. If you are data or analytics engineer, then definitely it's obvious that you are going to use the data services in your job of Azure. And if you are an Azure DevOps engineer, then you are using compute services, Azure Container Services, Azure Kubernetes clusters. So now, after compute, you can see I have these containers services. As Azure DevOps, I have to use these services. So from DevOps perspective, these services are important, and we are going to learn each and every service in our Azure Administrator course. So now you can see if you are if you want to run containers on the cloud, which service should I use? Then we have Azure Containers, container instances, container registries, Kubernetes Fleet Manager, Kubernetes Service. So these are services for running containers on Azure. So after that, if you are a database administrator or a database engineer, then we have this Azure Cosmos DB, which is a platform as a service, and we have Azure Database for Postgres. So that's how Azure has categorized all its services. And that's what I love about Azure. Every service is categorized. And if you are looking for any specific service, you have to navigate to service. Like, for instance, I have given you the example of AI. So if you are looking for AI and ML services, you can easily navigate here and you will find the service of your choice. Like me, if I am a DevOps, I am looking for like virtual machine images. I can click on it. I'm looking for virtual machines. I can simply click and create virtual machines. So this navigation is really awesome and I love it. Honestly, I love it. So now, as Azure architects, as Azure DevOps architect, we have a dedicated section for DevOps services on Azure as well. Now you can see every DevOps related service is listed here, like GitHub. It is integrated with GitHub. And also we have app configuration. We have Azure Lab Services. We have Azure Network Connections, Elasticsearch. So all these DevOps tools are used in Azure DevOps category. And if you are looking for general services, we have like subscriptions, resource groups, and we have management groups. So these services are categorized under general. And if you are looking for identity, yes, that's what I was looking for. IAM, Identity and Access Management, for security, for account creation, all right, for rules, policies, we have identity services under identity. So each category has the number of services mentioned, like identity has 18 services, integration has 16 services. So this is how every service is categorized, and there are a number of services. If you are looking for Azure networking career, then I would recommend that you must know all the networking services of Azure Network Engineer. So there are DNS zones, IP prefixes, bastions, net gateway. By the way, as a DevOps engineer, we also interact with networking services as well. And if like express routes, we are going to discuss it in our upcoming lecture. What is express route? What is a virtual network in Azure? So and finally, the security services. So that's how, guys, we can see all the services under one umbrella, under one roof. And there are approximately more than 200 services provided by Azure. So I have to go here, these three lines, and I can go to all services and I can find the service that I'm looking for. But more easy way is to just search here, like security, okay? Or if I want to search for virtual network, I can search virtual networks and then I would be redirected to that service. So that's how I can create virtual network. So the navigation is pretty simple and pretty awesome. Also, if I want to create a custom dashboard of my own, you can see I have created this just to know about my resources, just to have a general overview of my resources, I can create a custom dashboard of my own on Azure dashboard. So, and we have this plus sign to create a resource, and we can use what type of resource I want to create. And finally, guys, if I want to create a resource, then I will click on this as well, create a resource, and all the categories are listed here as well. For instance, if I go to compute and I want to create a virtual machine. For instance, if I go to identity and I can move to uh, Microsoft Entra domain services. So that's how we can use these categories to create services, to create resources. That's it, guys, for today's lecture. We just saw how Azure portal looks like. We are going to extensively work on Azure portal in our Azure Administrator Associate course. Since it is Azure Fundamentals, so we have the only basics that we need to cover, that we need to learn. In case of any issues, feel free to ask me. I will see you in the next chapter of Azure Compute Services. We are going to deep dive in Azure Compute Services. Make sure to subscribe DevOps Molvi. I will see you in the next chapter. Have a good one. Bye. Hey guys, I hope you're doing great today. This is our fifth chapter of our AZ-900 Fundamentals course, and in which we are going to discuss the most frequently and the most important services in Azure, which are known as Azure Compute Services. So guys, this would be our fifth chapter, and it is very important because compute services are most frequently used in every IT company. So before we proceed further, make sure that you have subscribed DevOps Molvi. Let's get started and see what is the headline of today's lecture. So, Azure offers three major compute services, including virtual machines, containers, and Azure functions. These are the three major compute services. Okay, so we can run virtual machines, we can run Azure functions, which are developed, and we can run the code using Azure functions, and we can run containers on the cloud. Like in the previous chapter, I have told you that there is a dedicated service for Azure containers. If we want to run Docker containers on the cloud, we can use Azure container instances, and we can run our containers on the cloud. So these are the three major services in Azure which are categorized as compute services, like virtual machines, containers, and Azure functions. Don't worry, we are going to discuss each one by one. So, what are Azure virtual machines? It is pretty simple. It is a VM running in the cloud. It is a computer which runs on the cloud. Everyone knows it, okay? And with Azure virtual machines, we can create and use virtual machines in the cloud. So if I spin up a virtual machine, it means that I am running a computer. I am running a system. I'm running a machine in the cloud. So that is known as a virtual machine. Like we can run 3 or 4 virtual machines using Hyper-V or VMware on our laptop. So it becomes a mini cloud, right? So we can say that it is a mini cloud. It is our personal mini cloud. So similarly, we can use Azure virtual machines to run virtual machines in the cloud. The next point is we can create or use an already created image to rapidly provision virtual machines. A template, okay? A template can be used with pre-configurations, pre-installed softwares. We can create that template and we can spin up thousands of virtual machines using that single template. So it is an image, just like we have an ISO image and we use this image on our bootable USB to install Linux or any operating system of our choice. Similarly, we have a template, we have a created image, and we can use that image to run, to build, to create thousands of virtual machines, and we can run single virtual machine for minor tasks. For instance, if I have any development kind of tasks, or if I want to test any software, I can run a mini virtual machine for small mini tasks. And we can also group virtual machines together to provide high availability, scalability, and redundancy. For instance, if I am running my applications in any production environment and I want my application to never go down in any circumstances, so I can use Azure virtual machines together for high availability, for scalability. In my peak hours, I should have more virtual machines, and my off peak hours, I should have less virtual machines so that there is no disruption. And also, we must have redundancy. Okay, there should not be any latency, there should not be any my application getting slowed down, slowness issue, or network latency issues. So everything is addressed when we have multiple virtual machines build and run together. This is the first point when we want to have more than one virtual machine. So we have virtual machine scale sets. In virtual machine scale sets, we can use to create and manage a group of identical load balanced virtual machines. Now here, what does identical mean? It means that if I am going to create a scale set of, let's say, 10 virtual machines, so all those 10 virtual machines will have the same specifications, same number of CPUs, same amount of RAM. So those machines would be identical. However, they will have different configuration for network. After all those virtual machines will have different IP addresses, but as far as resources are concerned, those virtual machines would be balanced so they can handle the traffic equally, and those virtual machines will have equal amount of resources when we create a virtual machine scale set. So Azure automates the process of provisioning identical virtual machines. So it is just one click away. Azure will automate the process of provisioning. If I want to have 200 virtual machines, I can definitely use virtual machine scale set, and it will provision 200 identical virtual machines in few clicks. Everything would be automated. Scale sets centrally manage, configure, and update a large number of virtual machines in minutes. Guys, now here is a question in my mind, and obviously you must be having in your minds as well, that if I can create virtual machine one by one, what is the benefit or what is the advantage of using virtual machine scale sets? For instance, if I am a developer, I can create one or two virtual machines in few clicks. Okay, but for a large IT organization where there is thousands of employees, thousands of users, and there is millions of amount of traffic flowing, so it will take a long time if we are going to provision each virtual machine one by one. So instead, we can use virtual machine scale set with the same configuration. Let's say if I want to have all those 1,000 virtual machines to have Nginx installed, PHP installed, Docker installed, any other dependencies that I want to have installed on all those 1,000 virtual machines, I will create a single image, okay, a virtual machine image, and I will use that image with pre-installed softwares and dependencies to provision 1,000 virtual machines automatically in few clicks. So this is actually the core benefit of using virtual machine skill sets. However, if I am using my personal testing, I do not need these skill sets. All these skill sets are recommended and used in large IT companies for production environments. Now, there is another benefit of using virtual machine skill sets, that they also automatically deploy a load balancer to make sure that our resources are being used efficiently. So it means that if I want to have a scale set with, let's say, 10 virtual machines, 9 should carry the load and one virtual machine remains idle? No, not the case. Azure will make sure that all those 10 virtual machines carry equal amount of traffic. All those 10 virtual machines will carry equal amount of load. So Azure uses load balancer to equally distribute the traffic and load on all those virtual machines in a given scale set. I hope that you have got my point. Now, you can see I have attached a screenshot where you can see we can create virtual machine scale set. And now here, instance count, it means that I am going to create 10 virtual machines and all those virtual machines will be uniform. Now, there are a couple of modes like you can see orchestration modes, security type, scaling, and instance count. So I'm keeping them default because we are going to discuss them in our Azure Administrator Associate, but we can have a brief explanation of each mode. Like if it is flexible, it means that achieve high availability at scale with identical or multiple virtual machine types. And in uniform, which is optimized for large scale stateless workloads. So it depends on our requirement and we can set any orchestration mode. So I have kept all the values as default. And if I want to create 10 virtual machines, I will use the instance count here as 10. And Azure will create a virtual machine scale sets with 10 virtual machines with identical CPU, with identical amount of RAM and other resources. But every virtual machine is going to be billed and charged as pay as you go. If I want to increase the number of virtual machines, every virtual machine would be billed as pay as you go. So we have to keep that in mind. With virtual machine scale set, we can scale up to 2000 virtual machines at one time. So guys, now you can see how massively this would be. I want to create a virtual machine scale set with instance count as 2000. 2000 virtual machines with identical specifications, number of CPUs, RAM, and a load balancer, and everything is going to be done automatically. I have to use my mouse to have few clicks, okay? So 2000 virtual machines are few clicks away. That is the beauty of virtual machine skill set. Now imagine that, let me ask you that question. If you are asked to create, for instance, there is a large project, and if I want to assign you that task that you have to create 2000 virtual machines day end, how massively and how painful that task would be. And guess what? Everything is automatic in Azure virtual machine skill sets. And 2000 virtual machines are few clicks away. I have just to mention the modes, orchestration mode, security type, and scaling mode. And I have to place here the number of instances I want to have in my virtual machine scale set, and those instances would be provisioned automatically. All right, guys, now we have another set of virtual machines availability sets. Now, before we have discussed virtual machines scale sets, we have also virtual machines availability sets in Azure. There is a minor difference. We are going to discuss it. The availability set is a tool to help us build a more resilient, highly available environment. Just like we discussed that for stateless workloads, we can have Azure Virtual Machine scale set. But if I want to have my workloads highly available, availability sets, as the name says, is recommended for applications that need to be highly available. Okay, and Azure makes sure that the virtual machines be placed within an availability set run across multiple physical servers, compute racks, storage units, and network switches. If a hardware or software failure happens, only a subset of virtual machines are impacted and the overall solution stays operational. Now, that is actually the key difference between scale sets and availability sets. scale sets. For instance, let me share the example, and I would like to explain it with this scenario. For instance, if I want to have a scale set of 20 virtual machines, it is possible that all those 20 virtual machines are going to be placed in one rack with one network switch. Okay. And in availability sets, if I want to create an availability set for 20 virtual machines, Azure will divide and distribute those virtual machines in different racks. This is the difference. To achieve high availability, the virtual machines are going to be distributed in different compute racks, in different physical nodes, physical servers, and network switches. So, for instance, if 5 of the virtual machines in that availability set go down, I would have 15 working perfectly and they are going to carry my workload. So that's how we can use virtual machine availability sets if I want to have my applications highly available all the time. Now there is a key concept and it is important from exam point of view. We have fault domains and we have update domains. Let us discuss their difference one by one. In availability sets, now fault domain and update domains are used in virtual machines availability sets. Okay. And we have fault domains. Since we know that Azure distributes our virtual machines in different compute racks on different physical nodes and different network switches. How it is done? It is done using fault domains and update domains. Fault domains and update domains are used for high availability. Now, what is a fault domain? A fault domain actually protects against hardware failures. So, in a fault domain, our virtual machines would be placed in different racks. So that a fault domain is actually a physical rack. This is the more simple explanation. A fault domain is a physical rack where your virtual machines are going to be built. Each fault domain represents a separate rack in a data center with independent power and network. So if I have 10 virtual machines in a single rack and that single rack, the network switch goes down, it means that all my 10 virtual machines would go down in virtual machines skill sets. But in high availability set, I would use two fault domains. It means that there would be 5 virtual machines in rack 1, 5 virtual machines in rack 2. So in case the rack 1 fails or there is any network issues, the rest of the 5 virtual machines on rack 2 will keep running, providing high availability. I hope that you got the point, right? And if we have two fault domains, it means that our virtual machines will be created in two different racks. So it means that in short, simple words, a fault domain means a rack, a physical rack. The number of fault domains we use, it means that our virtual machines would be distributed in the number of racks in Azure data center. And in update domains, it is a logical group that Azure uses to manage updates and reboots in a controlled manner. Ensures rolling updates don't take down all virtual machines at once. So now again, if I have 10 virtual machines, I should create two update domains. Now, what would be the benefit of creating two update domains? That only 5 virtual machines will go down for any maintenance and for any upgradation. That is the purpose of creating update domains. Update domain is a logical group. Okay, it is a logical group of our virtual machines. So let's suppose if I have two update domains for 10 virtual machines, it means that 5 virtual machines would be placed in one update domain and the 5 virtual machines in the second update domain. If I want to carry out any maintenance or upgradation activity, so I will use update domain 1 and 5 virtual machines will go down for any upgradation or maintenance. That is actually for us. Azure will make sure that not all of the virtual machines go down at one time. It will impact our business. So Azure will create a logical group known as update domain, and that update domain is used for any planned activities, for maintenance, etc. So finally, if I want to repeat the concept, fault domains means physical racks. If I have 10 virtual machines and 2 fault domains, it means that one fault domain will have 5 virtual machines, the other fault domain or the rack have other 5 virtual machines. And similarly, in update domains, we will have 2 update domains. It means that there would be a logical group of 5 virtual machines in update domain 1 and 5 virtual machines in update domain 2. And it is done for us so that all of the VMs should not go down for any maintenance, for any updates. Only a certain number of virtual machines should go down, should go for any planned activity, and the rest of the virtual machines should keep running so that there is no business or revenue disruption. So that's all for us. Azure makes sure that our business should not get impacted with any rollouts, with any updates. Now here I have attached an availability set example. This is a screenshot. We are going to practically do it in our Azure Administrator Associates. So first of all, we can go through that. We can manage up to 2000 virtual machines at no added cost. We have to pay for only the capacity we use while mixing virtual machine sizes, zones, and fault domains. So there are no additional costs. We have to pay for the virtual machines. We have to pay for the compute capacity that we are going to use. But we can have 2000 virtual machines created using availability sets. Now you can see if I want to create an availability set, this would be the name of the availability set. This is the region, and I have fault domains as 2 and update domains as 4. Now, in case if I have 4 virtual machines in this availability set, can you please answer me how the virtual machines are going to be divided in the fault domains and update domains? Yes, you are right. There would be 2 virtual machines in each fault domain. Okay, it means that we will have 2 physical racks, 2 virtual machines in rack 1, fault domain 1, 2 virtual machines in rack 2, which is fault domain 2. And we are going to have 4 update domains. It means that there would be 1 virtual machine in each update domain. I hope that this concept is clear. Still, you are confused, you can ask me in the comments. Now, I have also explained here in the scenario, if we deploy 4 virtual machines in any availability set with 2 fault domains and 4 update domains, then Azure will distribute our virtual machines like that. 2 VMs in fault domain 1, 2 VMs in fault domain 2, and we have 4 update domains. It means that there would be 4 logical groups, and each logical group will have only 1 virtual machine. So, for instance, if there is any planned activity, I can use fault domain rack 1 and only 2 virtual machines will go down. And if I want to have 2 update domains to go down for any planned activity, then I can use update domain 0 and 1, and only 2 virtual machines will go down. And the rest of the 2 virtual machines will carry out our workload and our applications will not be impacted. I hope that now it is clear about fault domains and update domains. Fault domain means a physical rack. Update domain is a logical group. Okay, now again, the difference between scale sets and availability sets. In a nutshell, scale sets are identical virtual machines for load balancing, whereas availability sets have virtual machines for high availability. So, scale sets are used for load balancing equal amount of traffic, and they don't focus on high availability. And if my applications need high availability, I should go for high availability sets, virtual machines availability sets. Scale sets have all virtual machines as identical. However, availability sets can have different virtual machines connected with different networks. This is the difference. And also, scale sets are focused on performance, and availability sets are focused on high availability. So these are the three major differences between scale sets and availability sets. There are no additional cost of scale or virtual machine sets. We have to pay for the compute capacity, I mean the virtual machines. All right, guys, now there should be one example each that we must know about scale sets and availability sets. It is important. Example scenario. Scale sets are recommended for web applications and big data processing applications because we need high performance. Whereas availability sets are meant for high availability, like the systems that track and manage aircraft in real time need to be highly available. So if my application is running in any aircraft control system, it should be highly available. So I can use virtual machines availability sets. And if I have a web application or big data processing application, then I must use scale set. Okay, lift and shift. This is a beautiful name. We can move our physical on-prem servers to the Azure cloud. This is related to Azure migrations. If I have a physical data center in my IT organization, in my office, and I want to move everything on the cloud, on Azure, then I can use lift and shift. So, lift and shift means that migrating on prem infrastructure to Azure cloud. We can create an image of the physical server and host it within a VM on Azure with little or no changes. This process is known as lift and shift. For instance, if I have a virtual machine, dev virtual machine with a number of softwares and tools installed on it, I can create an image for that, and I can use that image on my Azure account to spin up a new virtual machine with the same tools, with the same specifications and softwares installed on my Azure cloud virtual machine. So that's how we can migrate our on-prem infrastructure from our on-premises data center to Azure cloud, and this process is known as lift and shift. All right, guys, since it is a complete lecture on compute services, so we are not limited to Azure virtual machines and scale sets and availability sets. There are other compute services that we can use using Azure, and it is Azure Virtual Desktop. So we are going to quickly discuss the key important services in Azure, which are under the compute category. So Azure Virtual Desktop allows us to access virtualized Windows desktops and applications from any device, as if they were running directly on our own computer but hosted in the cloud. This is the complete explanation. And for instance, if I have a virtual machine, a Windows virtual machine running on Azure, and I want to access it just like I work on my laptop, I can use Azure Virtual Desktop. So it will give the same feeling as that virtual machine running on the cloud is actually I'm running it on my laptop. So I can use Azure Virtual Desktop, and it will give us the feeling that the virtual machines are running directly on our own computer. Instead of having a physical computer, we can access a virtualized version of Windows through a web browser or a dedicated client. So I can use a web browser to access my Windows virtual machine running on the cloud using Azure Virtual Desktop. So it is an application to access our Windows virtual machines remotely, just like we normally work on our laptops. So it gives the same feeling that this virtual machine that is actually running on the cloud is directly being managed on my computer. So we can use Azure Virtual Desktop to manage our Windows virtual machines from our computer, and we can also run containers on Azure, Docker containers. Azure Container Instances is actually the service which offers the fastest and simplest way to run a container in Azure. And also, guys, with Azure Container Instances, we can run a serverless container service which allows us to run containers without managing the underlying infrastructure. And also, we can use Azure Kubernetes services, which is a container orchestration service, and it is used to manage the life cycle of containers. So both are actually DevOps services, Azure Containers Instances and Azure Kubernetes Service. One service is used to run containers in the cloud, and the other service is used to orchestrate all those containers that are running on the cloud, and it is Azure Kubernetes service. So if I want to run Docker containers on Azure, I can use Azure Container Instances service. And if I want to have managed Kubernetes clusters on Azure, I can use Azure Kubernetes service. The other one is Azure App Service. It is also a compute service by Azure, and it is used to run our applications directly on Azure. Azure App Service is an HTTP-based service for hosting web applications, REST APIs, and mobile backends. It also supports multiple languages like .NET, .NET Core, Java, Ruby, Node, PHP, or Python. So if I want to run my applications directly on Azure, I can use the Azure App Service. So since, guys, I'm sorry to say that it is a fundamentals course, so we must have a general idea of each service. We are not going to deep dive in this course since it is fundamentals. So that's why we are going to discuss each service in more details with practical, with labs in our Azure Administrator Associate course. And the final one is Azure Functions. If I want to run my code directly on Azure, I can use the Azure Functions. Azure Functions is an event-driven serverless computing. Okay, Azure Function, just like we have AWS Lambda on AWS. For serverless computing, we can use Azure Functions to run our code, and it is a serverless compute option that does not require maintaining virtual machines or containers. So we can get rid of virtual machines and containers using Azure Functions. Also, Azure Functions runs our code when it triggers and automatically deallocates resources when the function is finished. So when we are going to start our function, Azure Functions allocate compute resources that are required to run that piece of code. And when our code runs successfully, all those compute resources are deallocated so that we do not get any extra cost. So we can run our code directly using Azure Function. All right, guys, I have been logged into my Azure portal, and you can see that I am on the home screen of Azure portal. I can create resource from here directly. So for instance, if I want to create virtual machines, I can navigate to the virtual machines option. And if I click on it, now you can see it is compute infrastructure. Since we are discussing the compute services, now virtual machines are the compute services. So we can create virtual machines from here. And as per the brief description, create a virtual machine that runs Linux or Windows. So we have the choice whether we want to use Linux or Windows virtual machine. Select an image from the marketplace or use your own customized image. So from here, we can use our custom images to run virtual machines. And in the migration process, that's what we have to do. We have to create a custom image that is relevant, that is similar to what we are running on our on-prem data centers. Then we can easily migrate, or we can create the snapshots, we can create the images of the virtual machines that are running on our on-prem data centers, and we can use those images here on Azure to spin up our virtual machines on Azure Cloud. So if I click on the plus sign here, I will go to create virtual machines. And there is a lot of information that is needed to create a virtual machine, like the subscription. Okay, now pay as you go is my subscription since my free tier has expired. So I am using pay as you go subscription. The resource group, I can create a new, or I can use a resource group that has been created before. And also, guys, the virtual machine name, region, availability zones, I can select the zone of my choice from here. Sorry, I have to scroll down from here. Now there are 3 availability zones, and if I want to have my virtual machines in 2 different availability zones, then I can select 2 availability zones just like I have selected here, and there would be 2 virtual machines in 2 different availability zones for high availability. Also, we can see the description is written here. Based on your zone selection, we will place 2 virtual machines, right? I'm creating 2 virtual machines in 2 different availability zones, one in each selected zone. You may want to create this resource as a virtual machine scale set. Okay, the scale sets can also be created in different availability zones. And after that, guys, we can select the image template from here. Okay, now we can see a lot of pre-built image templates that we can use. For instance, if it is Ubuntu server 22.04, let's say if I want to if I want to create a Linux virtual machine, and after that I can select the size. This is important. And when I change the size, the cost will be changed accordingly. Now, for instance, if I select this one, okay, now you can see the cost has been updated here. It would cost me $223 per month. And if I want to have a little mini VM, and I can select from here. Now you can see the cost has reduced to 19.67 US dollar per month. And also the cost has been broken down. Now this is actually the collective cost of 2 virtual machines. Now if I go back and I select only one zone, now you can see the cost has been reduced to 9.83 US dollars per month. And if I select all 3 zones, again, zone 3, now the cost has been changed to around 30 US dollars. So what does this mean? That there would be 3 virtual machines created in 3 availability zones for high availability. But for instance, if I'm a student, I just want to learn and I want to have only one virtual machine in one zone, then this would be my monthly cost. And the cost is breakdown here. And the total breakdown of the cost is also mentioned here, that virtual machine will cost 4.56, the size, and also the disks, okay? The disk that I will attach to the virtual machine. And now after that, we can select the architecture. There are 2 different architectures. So this would be the architecture that I have selected here, and the size. And also we can use password, username, password, and SSH keys to launch our virtual machine. So I can simply review and create from here, but you can see that I have a number of other options that I can go through and change accordingly, change my virtual machine, customize my virtual machine, and then I can review plus create, and my virtual machine would be created. Similarly, guys, I can search for scale set here, scale sets, and virtual machine scale sets. Okay, now we can see that create a virtual machine skill set to deploy and manage a load balanced set of identical Windows or Linux virtual machines. Use autoscale to automatically scale virtual machine resources in and out. And similarly, we can have availability sets, but these are for large workloads, right? We can spin up to 2000 virtual machines. It means that we are going to pay for the virtual machines only. We are going to pay for the compute capacity only. And now here we can have our region. We can select the 4 domains. For instance, if I increase the 4 domains, it means that there are 3 racks in which my virtual machines would be launched. And I can have 6 update domains. Update domain is a logical group. Now, for instance, if I am going to create 30 virtual machines, it means that 10 virtual machines would be in 3 different racks, and there would be 6 update domains. It means that there would be 6 logical groups, and each logical group will have 5 virtual machines. So that's how we can create availability sets, and we can spin up to 2000 virtual machines. And after that, guys, I can search for app services. Okay, you can see app services. If I want to deploy my application directly on Azure, so these are app services, and I can create a web app, static web app plus database, and also WordPress. So if I want to host my WordPress directly on Azure, I can use app services on Azure. Just want to have a quick look. Now you can see here, I can name my web application, and I will get this domain, a full quality domain name. And also, just this is just like we are going to get hosting from Azure. Okay, so we can deploy our applications directly. Instead of having virtual machines, we can deploy our web applications directly on Azure. We can use the app service on Azure. Similarly, guys, in container instances, now you can see we also discussed about the compute services of containers. And in container instances, we can run Docker containers in Azure. And also we have Kubernetes service as well. Since we are just having an overview, it is fundamentals. We are going to have a deep dive in our Azure Administrator Associate course. That is why I'm repeating this again and again, that please don't worry. This is fundamentals. So we are going to have a general overview as quick as possible. So we have Kubernetes services, and we can run Kubernetes cluster on Azure using Azure Kubernetes service. For instance, if I want to deploy application, I want to create a new Kubernetes cluster, I can use Azure Kubernetes service. So that was actually a general overview of different compute services. We are going to have a deep look in our Azure DevOps and Azure Administrator Associate course. So that's it for today, guys. And I hope that you have learned a lot about compute services on Azure. In the next chapter, we are going to discuss about Azure networking services. I will see you in the next lecture. Make sure that you subscribe DevOps Molvi. Have a good one. Bye. All right, guys, I hope you're doing great today. This is our chapter number 6, in which we are going to learn about Azure virtual networking services. So in the previous chapter, we discussed about the compute services like virtual machines, scale sets, availability sets, Azure functions, and also Azure container instances, Azure Kubernetes services. So we had a general overview of all those compute services. In this lecture, we are going to have a quick overview of the networking services that are offered by Azure. So before we get started, make sure that you subscribe DevOps Molvi. So what is the headline of today's lecture? And it is Azure Virtual Networks enable Azure resources to communicate with each other. Guys, in our university, in our graduation, you know that we learn about communication. We learn about how multiple computers, multiple systems can talk with each other. They can communicate with each other if they are on the same network. Network is important for systems communication. Networking is important if we want to access systems. If there are 10 or 20 systems in a lab, I can access easily system 1 from system 2 or system 2 from system 3 and vice versa. So that is why communication is important between the systems so that we can share data and also we can transfer files among different computers, different systems without any hazards. So that is why networking is required in Azure as well, so that our virtual machines can talk to each other via private network, and we can also use them for the global traffic or the global internet communication as well. So what is an Azure virtual network? In order to spin up a virtual machine, we have to use a virtual network. An Azure virtual network is a service that provides the fundamental building block for our private network in Azure. If I want to have all my virtual machines privately accessible within a network, I can create an Azure virtual network. A virtual network is similar to a traditional network. That's why I have explained you the example of any office, any lab where there are 20 or 30 computers and they are networked together so that they can easily communicate with each other. Similar is the case of virtual machines on the cloud. With Azure Virtual Network, all those virtual machines are on the same network so that they can also talk, they can also communicate with each other via a private communication mechanism. And this is why it is also important that if we want to communicate our virtual machines privately, we can create an Azure virtual network. It brings extra benefits of the Azure infrastructure such as scale, availability, and isolation. All resources in a virtual network can communicate outbound with the internet by default. So whether it is a private communication or public communication, we can use Azure virtual network so that our virtual machines can also interact with the internet. And also, guys, there are other perks or benefits of Azure infrastructure. We can scale our network up and down. We can get IP addresses. We can also get our network isolated from other networks. So this is virtual network. Just like a traditional network, we can use Azure Virtual Network to spin up our virtual machines. They can be isolated, they can interact with the internet, and also if we want our virtual machines not to be publicly accessible, we can also do that in Azure Virtual Network. Yes, and that's how it is possible with public and private endpoints. As the name says, the public endpoint, which is publicly available, and private endpoints, which is privately accessible. Public endpoints have a public IP address and can be accessed from anywhere in the world. Now, guys, there is no doubt about that. If it is a public IP, what does this mean? It means that this public IP can be accessed from anywhere in the world. And a private IP address can also be accessed privately. I mean to say, we have to use whether a VPN or we have to use any console. Private endpoints exist within a virtual network and have a private address from within the address space of that virtual network. So there are two different types of endpoints: public, which are publicly accessible, like public IP address, and private endpoints are privately accessible within a virtual network. Why use an Azure virtual network? What are the benefits? What are the features, in other words, of Azure virtual network? The first is communication of Azure resources with the internet. If I want to run virtual machines in a virtual network and I want to host my applications on those virtual machines, I want to have those applications accessible over the internet, then I have to use Azure virtual network. And also communication between Azure resources. If I have 10 virtual machines and also I want to have a secure communication between those 10 virtual machines, I can create a virtual network and I will use that virtual network to spin up all those 10 virtual machines. If all those virtual machines are on the same network, it means that they can communicate with each other without any issues. And also, guys, we can use Azure Virtual Network for communication with on-prem resources. Okay, if my virtual machines are on-prem and I want to access virtual machines on the cloud, I can use a virtual network. And also we can filter unwanted network traffic, we can route network traffic, and also we can integrate with other Azure services using Azure Virtual Network. So these are some of the great benefits of having Azure Virtual Network. It is impossible without any Azure Virtual Network to have our virtual machines accessible over the internet, to have our applications running on the Azure virtual machines to be accessible over the internet. It means that whether we want to privately or publicly access our virtual machines or applications running on those virtual machines, we have to use Azure Virtual Network. So there must be a question in your mind that how my virtual machines communicate with each other, how my resources like containers or Kubernetes clusters can talk with each other on Azure. So there are actually two ways. The first we have already discussed, it is Azure Virtual Network. We can create a virtual network and when we can bring all the services together on that same virtual network. When all the services, when all the resources are on the same network, it means that they can communicate with each other. And also we can use service endpoints like public endpoints or private endpoints. So these are the two ways how our resources communicate with each other, whether we want to use virtual networks or service endpoints. And in my recommendation, the most easiest and quickest way is to create a virtual network which enables secure communication between Azure resources. And also our resources can communicate with the internet, and also our resources at the same time can talk with our on-prem infrastructure. And the other resource communication method is to have service endpoints. Enable secure communication among Azure services. Privately, we can use those endpoints so that our multiple resources can talk with each other. All right, Azure VPN gateway. Now, you must be thinking that how is it possible that my resources can communicate with each other privately without exposing them to the internet or publicly? So we can use Azure VPN gateway. We can connect our on-prem networks to Azure through site-to-site VPNs, which is like a remote branch office. And then we can connect our virtual machines on Azure Virtual Networks from anywhere. A VPN is actually a tunnel. If I want to securely access my virtual machines on the cloud, I can use Azure VPN gateway and it has no upfront cost. There are no termination fees and we just have to pay only for what we use. The traffic would always remain encrypted. This is actually the major point that I wanted to tell you, that our traffic, our communication would be highly secure and encrypted, and we can use this VPN gateway at no additional cost. So we must use it, right? We must use it so that we can securely access our virtual machines on the cloud from our on-prem data center as well. So Azure provides site-to-site VPNs, and it is just like I have multiple branches in my country, and from any head office, I want to remotely access all the systems of all those branches. Then I must use site-to-site VPNs so that my communication with all those systems is highly secure and encrypted. And also there is one important service in Azure networking is ExpressRoute. And ExpressRoute enables a direct connection to Microsoft's global network bypassing the public internet. Did you get it? No? So actually, it is just like that. I am directly connected with Azure Global Network using ExpressRoute, whether I am from Pakistan, from India, Australia, or Asia. It means that when I use ExpressRoute, it will give us the feeling that I am in the Azure availability zone and I'm directly connected with Azure's global infrastructure. My connection, my laptop is directly connected with Azure global network. So I have to use this ExpressRoute service. In simple words, if I want our computer to connect directly with Azure global network, we can use ExpressRoute. This direct connection aims to enhance reliability, speed, and security for our cloud based applications and data. Just like if I share the example of any banking applications, for instance, if I am running secure, highly sensitive banking applications, financial operation, FinOps applications on Azure, and I don't want my data to travel on the internet. I just want to work on my data, my files directly on Azure. So I want my computer, my laptop, or my network should be directly connected with Azure's network. I can use ExpressRoute. It will bypass the internet and I would be directly connected with Azure's global network. So this is what ExpressRoute used for. So there are more additional features of ExpressRoute like connectivity to Microsoft Cloud services across all regions in the geographical region, global connectivity to Microsoft services, dynamic routing, and built-in redundancy in every peering location for high reliability. And we can also use dynamic routing between our network and Microsoft via border gateway protocol. And these are actually the terms that are used in ExpressRoute. Since we are going to directly connect with Azure's global network, we can use it is just like we are physically in the data center. It is just like we have bypassed all the internet traffic and we have a direct connection with no hazards, with no issues with Microsoft Global Network. And guys, one more thing, it is super fast because ExpressRoute Direct allows to connect directly to Microsoft Global Network at a high bandwidth connectivity up to 100 gigabytes per second for scenarios like massive data migration. Now you can think about it, 100 GB per second is the speed, bandwidth, and it would be really fast. It would be really secure and reliable. So that's what ExpressRoute Direct is used for. If I want myself to be directly connected with Azure Global Network, I can use this service. After that, guys, we can use security groups and peering. The security groups are actually the virtual firewalls. We can block certain ports, we can block IP addresses, malicious IP addresses using security groups. We can create a network security groups with rules to filter inbound traffic and outbound traffic from virtual machines and subnets. Just like I told you, security groups are virtual firewalls. They will filter the network traffic. Every malicious traffic would be filtered coming in or out from our virtual machines. We can link virtual networks together by using virtual network peering. If there are 10 or 20 different virtual networks, we can peer them together. We can make them friends and it would become collectively a single big virtual network because all the virtual networks would be peered together. Peering allows two virtual networks to connect directly to each other. Just like we have friends, we have our peers, so we can have two different virtual networks to be peered, to be connected together. After that, guys, we have Azure DNS. If I want to use the DNS domain name services of Azure, just like we have Route 53 on AWS, Cloud DNS on GCP, we have Azure DNS. And I can register my domains. I can create domains on Azure. Just like I have given the example, if I want to have abc.com, I can use Azure DNS and I can register my domains using Azure DNS. It is a DNS hosting service for domain names, and it also provides name servers for name resolutions using Microsoft Azure infrastructure. We can register full quality domain names like DevOpsMolvi.com on Azure DNS. And also we can manage DNS records, A record, NS records, MX records. So we can use Azure DNS for our domain records as well. Now, if I want to see the virtual network, you can navigate here, virtual network. And now this is the symbol of a virtual network. We can create virtual networks, and virtual network is used to securely connect your Azure resources with each other. Connect your virtual network to your on-prem networks using an Azure VPN gateway or ExpressRoute. So if I have an on-prem infrastructure data center and I want to connect with my Azure resources on the cloud, I can use Azure VPN gateway or ExpressRoute. So if I search here ExpressRoute, and yes, this is actually ExpressRoute Direct. You can see I have shared the information that ExpressRoute Direct provides 100 Gbps or 10 Gbps connectivity, which supports active connectivity at scale, and it gives us the ability to connect directly with Microsoft's global network. And finally, I can search for Azure DNS. Okay, and yeah, this is Azure DNS, and I can register, I can create my domains on Azure DNS using Azure DNS. So back to virtual network, and this is virtual network, and also we can see virtual network gateways. So that's how we can navigate to different services, guys, on Azure. So Azure VPN Gateway connects your on-prem networks to Azure through site-to-site VPNs in a similar way that you set up and connect to a branch office, a remote branch office, and all these are Azure networking services. So we have already discussed the major ones like Azure Virtual Networks, Virtual Network Gateways, VPN gateways, ExpressRoute Direct, Azure DNS. So that's it for today's lecture. I will see you in our Azure storage services in the upcoming lecture. Make sure that you subscribe DevOps Molvi. Have a good one. And still, if you have any questions, let me know in the comments. Bye. Hey guys, I hope you're doing great today. This is our chapter number 7, in which we are going to learn about Azure storage services. Guys, this is our AZ-900 fundamentals course, in which we are going to cover all the fundamentals and key services of Azure Cloud. In the previous chapter, we discussed about Azure networking services, and also before that chapter, we discussed about Azure compute services. In Azure networking services, we discussed about Azure virtual network, ExpressRoute, VPN gateways, site-to-site VPNs, and so on. So in Azure storage services, we are going to have a quick look on the storage services that are offered by Azure. So let's get started and make sure that you have subscribed DevOps Molvi. Let's begin with today's headline, and it is about Azure storage. This is an overview. This is the conclusion of Azure storage, which is a cloud-based service from Microsoft Azure platform, and it offers highly available, secure, durable, scalable, and redundant storage solutions. Now, there are a number of terms that are being used here. Number one is highly available. It means that you will find your data every time. If you are going to use Microsoft Azure storage, it is highly available. It means that our data should be replicated across multiple availability zones to make it highly available. For instance, if one zone goes fail, the other will have our data, and we are not going to lose our customers. We are not going to lose our data. It means that Azure storage is highly available. And number two is security. Azure storage is secure, it is durable, and durability means that there is no data loss or data corruption. Okay, high availability means that data would be available every time. Secure means that our data would be secure from the threats and malicious attempts. Number three is durable, which means that our data is not going to be lost or corrupted. And scalable means that with the increase in the data, I would get more storage. If my data is like, suppose, 10 GB, and tomorrow it is going to be 20 GB, and then 50, and then 1 terabyte, and my storage account will get that specific amount of storage that I need on the spot. So it is also redundant. Now, what is redundant? It means that multiple copies of my data would be there on multiple physical locations, on multiple regions, and also in multiple availability zones. Now, it means that my data is highly redundant. And in case of any disaster, natural disaster, power failure, internet outage, one of the region is going to serve my data, and that is known as redundancy. It means that having multiple copies of your data across multiple regions and availability zones. So, highly available, it means that I am going to get my data, I am able to access my data every time. It is high availability. Secure, it means that my data would be secure from any external threats. And durable, it means that my data would never be lost and it is never be corrupted. It is always durable. And scalable means that with the increase of data, my storage account will grow. Okay, it is scalable. And redundant means that I have multiple copies of my data on multiple physical locations like regions and availability zones. So these are interchangeable terms that are most frequently used in storage: high available, secure, durable, and scalable, and redundant. So, what is Azure Storage? Azure Storage is designed to handle massive amounts of data and traffic, ensuring high availability and performance. It means that we can store up to thousands of terabytes of data on Azure. Data is replicated across multiple storage nodes and regions to ensure durability and also redundancy. Azure Storage also provides protection against hardware failures with data encryption. Now, security is also covered since our data is encrypted, and there would be no data loss, there would be no data corruption, and our storage would be highly available because Azure Storage also provides protection against the hardware failures. Now, what is redundancy? We have discussed it earlier, but redundancy in simple words means to have, yeah, or to store multiple copies of our data. For instance, I have one folder with my sensitive data and I upload it into my Azure storage account. Now, Azure will copy data folder across multiple availability zones across two regions, let's suppose. Okay. Now, in two availability zones and two regions, it means that if one goes fail, I will get the copy of my data from the other region or from the other availability zones. So, Azure copies the data across multiple availability zones and regions. It is known as redundancy, and it ensures high availability and data durability in failures or outage. In case of disaster, if one region goes down, I would be able to access my data from other region which is up and running. Now, this is important from exam point of view. Redundancy types in Azure, and I have given the example of each type in Azure. The first one is, and the simple one, locally redundant storage on one availability zone. It is a single data center. And the second is geo-redundant storage. It involves that our data would be on multiple regions, okay? US East and US West, okay? So it means geo-redundant storage copies our data across multiple regions. Read access geo-redundant storage, and it means that we will have read-only access in case of any power outage or in case of any network failure. We still are able to have a read-only access to our data. Now that is why it is known as read access geo-redundant storage. Zone redundant storage, it means that our data would be in multiple availability zones. Geo zone redundant storage, it is highly available, most durable, and most redundant storage type in Azure because it is geo zone redundant storage. Combines geographical locations, means there would be two regions and there would be two or more availability zones in geo zone redundant storage. There would be multiple zones and multiple regions. And finally, read access geozone redundant storage. It also offers us read-only access to the secondary region and zone in case of any power outage, network outage, or natural disaster. So we are going to use any of these depending on the nature of data. If I want to have it highly available every time, I would recommend that we must have read access geozone redundant storage. In case of any issues, our data would be still available with read-only access. So these are the types, and the most basic one is LRS, locally redundant storage. It means that our data would be on a single node, on a single storage point, in a single availability zone, and in a single region. So this would be more cheaper locally redundant storage. Now in the exams, you are going to be asked according to the scenarios, and you have to recommend the best storage solution possible. All right, guys, now we have actually 5 types of Azure storage services. 3 are here and 2 are here. The first type is blob storage. And this is the most common type of Azure storage service, and it is a massively scalable object store for text and binary data. For instance, if I have any text or binary data, I can use the blob storage. And the number 2 is disk storage, which is also common, which allows data to be persistently stored and accessed from an attack virtual hard disk, just like we use hard disk in our computers and we store our data on these disks. Similarly, we can use disk storage in Azure Storage to store our data on persistent disks. And the third one is file storage, which is used to provide fully managed file shares in the cloud, and we can share those files with our teams using Azure File Storage Service. The number 4th is queue storage, which is a service for storing large quantities of messages. So if I have any notification service and I want to store large number of messages, I can use queue storage for storing large quantities of messages. Number 5 is table storage for database, a NoSQL service for storing semi-structured data, and it is known as table storage. So blob storage for binary and text data, disk storage, just like we normally use disks to store our data. Number 3rd is file storage, which is a fully managed file shares in the cloud, and queue storage for storing large queues of messages. And number 5th is table storage, which is used for semi-structured data. So these are actually 5 types of Azure storages. After that, guys, we have Azure Migrate, and it is a service by Azure which is used to migrate from an on-prem environment to the cloud. Let's suppose I am getting out of storage space on my on-prem data center and I want to move my data to Azure storage, then I am going to use Azure Migrate, which is a service to migrate, to transfer massive amounts of data from my on-prem data center to Azure cloud. And also, we can migrate our physical data to the cloud. We can use migrate service, and Azure Migrate functions as a hub to help us manage the assessment and migration of our on-prem data center to Azure. If I want to migrate my on-prem data, then I am going to use the Azure Migrate service, which helps in such kind of migrations. And the last one is Azure Data Box. Azure Data Box is a physical migration service. Okay, now we have to keep that in mind that it involves physical migration, and it helps to transfer large amount of data in a quick, inexpensive, and reliable way. Databox storage device would be shipped to us, and it has a maximum usable storage capacity of 80 terabytes. Okay, if I want to have that kind of data and I want to physically migrate, then I'm going to use Azure Databox. And we can order the Databox device via the Azure portal to import or export data from Azure. I've never used this kind of service before, but we should have a knowledge and we should know from exam perspective that Azure Databox is a physical migration service for our data. For instance, if I have 80 terabytes of data and I want to move it to Azure, then I am going to use the Azure Databox, and that Databox device can be ordered from Azure portal. Once I have this device, I have to copy my data to Azure Databox device, and then that data would be transferred, would be copied to my Azure account in my storage account. And this is a physical migration service known as Databox. And we can see here, if I can find it, Azure Data Box. And yes, Azure Data Box, yes, this is here, and no Azure Data Box to display. And this is Azure Data Box service, which is used for large scale data transfer to Azure with Azure Data Box. Okay, and also we have Azure Storage, where we can create a storage account here. This is a storage account, and you can see that we can have up to 500 terabytes of data in the cloud. We can create a storage account, and this storage account is able to store up to 500 terabytes of data on Azure, which is a massive amount of data. And also, guys, last service is Azure Migrate. Let's see if we have it in here. Yes, we have Azure Migrate, and it is also used for migration from our on-prem data center to the Azure cloud. We can use this service. So that was a little overview of Azure storage, and we discussed high availability, security, durability, redundancy, and every storage type like locally redundant storage, GeoZone, read-only GeoZone. So all these services have been covered as well. And also we discussed about 5 different storage types like blob storage, queue storage, file storage, okay, and disk storage, etc. So that's it for today, guys. I hope that you have a better understanding of the Azure storage service on Azure. I will see you in the next chapter, chapter number 8 of our AZ-900 fundamentals course. If you still have any confusion or question, feel free to ask me in the comments. I will see you in the next chapter. Make sure to just subscribe. DevOps Molvi. Have a good one. Bye. Hey guys, I hope you're doing great today. This is our chapter number 8 about identity and access management. Guys, in any IT company, there are employees, there are users. So we have to manage all those users. We have to manage user identities and group identities, and we have to make sure that the right users have the right access at the right time. So this is actually the goal of identity and access management. Identity and access management is a cloud service which allows us to add user identities. It allows us to modify user accounts. It allows us to add group accounts, group identities, roles, policies, and permissions. So what is Azure IAM? Let's dive in. And before we proceed, make sure that you subscribe DevOps Molvi. Let's see what is the headlines of today's lecture. So Microsoft Entra ID is a Microsoft cloud-based identity and access management service which helps us to manage identity accounts. Guys, if you are confused with identity accounts, you can think of it as user. So IAM helps us to manage users. IAM helps us to manage groups. IAM helps us to manage policies and roles and permissions. So that's what IAM is used for, and it is one of the key service that is used to protect our account from any unauthorized access. So what is identity and access management? We should know about the core concept of IAM. IAM is a framework which ensures the right people have the access to the right resources at the right time. This is actually the theme of identity and access management. Right people, I mean the users of the IT organization, no external or unauthorized users. Right people, your employees, department people, IT team people, marketing people. So the right people have the access to the right resources. As a DevOps engineer, I must have access to the virtual machines. I must have access to the container instances. I must have access to the Azure Kubernetes service. I'm the right guy. I am DevOps engineer for any IT company. I should have access to the DevOps resources at the right time. Right people with access to the right resources at the right time. So this is actually the conclusion of IAM. No external or unauthorized users and no unwanted resources. For instance, if I am a DevOps engineer, then I definitely don't need access to the BI tools or analytics or marketing tools in my cloud account, in my Azure account. So as a DevOps engineer, I am the right person to have access to the resources like virtual machine scale set, containers, Kubernetes clusters, etc. So these are the right resources for me at the right time. And IAM also allows organizations to create, manage, and group user identities. This is also one of the core purposes of using IAM. It helps us to create users. It helps us to modify users. It also helps us to attach roles, permissions, policies to certain users and groups. And also, guys, access control, which is built in the IAM framework, it also enables organizations to control access to applications and resources based on user roles and permissions. Let me explain it. If there is a user, a DevOps intern, okay, and it is obvious that the DevOps intern do not need or should not have any admin access to any of the resources on our cloud platform. So that's what access control is used for. Access control actually allows a certain user to have the correct access. So the DevOps intern should have the read-only access. He or she can only view our resources on our cloud account, on our Azure account. A DevOps intern should not have any kind of right role or admin role. So that's what access control is used for. Access control enables us that the right persons should have the right access to the right resources. And guys, by the way, there is one important thing that we must know, that identity and access management work on the least privileged principle. What is that? Least privilege principle. We should give the only required access to any user. If a user needs read-only access, we should not give him or her the right access or the admin access. That's what least privilege principle is, that the correct access should be granted to the correct or to the right user. Now, what is directory service? A directory service is a central registry for information about users, groups, computers, printers, and other network resources. It is a central register which has all the records. So it is known as a directory service. In directory service, I can find information, I can find all the details about my users, my groups, my devices like routers, printers, okay, and also the other network resources. Like I told you, that resources like network switches, routers, and other devices which are used by the employees within an IT organization. It also stores attributes like usernames, passwords, user preferences, device information, and more, and verifies user identities for access to systems and applications. If any user wants to log in to the Azure portal, that user must have the correct credentials. All those credentials, when it is common, whenever I sign in to hotmail.com or light.com, I have to give my username and password. Then this username and password is verified by the directory service. Directory service confirms that this user exists and the password is correct. So after that, I am granted access to my account. That is the similar case here as well. If any device needs authorization, if any user needs authorization or authentication, that user's credentials are verified with the help of directory service, because directory service is the storage point of all the informations like username, passwords, and if the information is correct, that user is granted access to the resources. So now, what is Microsoft Entra ID? Microsoft Entra ID is cloud-based IAM service. It was formerly known as Azure Active Directory. Just like I told you, it was Azure Active Directory. Microsoft Entra ID is a directory service which enables us to sign in and access both Microsoft cloud applications and cloud applications that we develop. So Microsoft Entra ID is identity and access management service. It helps us to log into our user accounts. It helps us to access our resources on the cloud. It helps us to modify. It helps us to build and access our cloud application on our Azure account. So Microsoft Entra ID is the cloud IAM service on Azure. So there is more information about Microsoft Entra ID. We can connect our on-prem Active Directory with Microsoft Entra ID. Microsoft can help protect us by detecting suspicious sign-in attempts at no extra cost. For instance, if I want to connect my on-prem devices like printers, systems, computers with Microsoft Entra ID, I can do that. It is possible. And also, Microsoft Entra ID helps us to detect any unauthorized logins, any malicious attempts on our accounts. Azure administrators, application developers, Microsoft 365, Office 365, Azure, and Microsoft Dynamics CRM online subscribers users use Microsoft Entra ID for account authentication. So these are all services that rely on Microsoft Entra ID. So Azure engineers, DevOps engineers, administrators, application developers, they all use Microsoft Entra ID for account authentication. So what is Microsoft Entra ID used for? There are four major uses of Microsoft Entra ID. The number one is authentication. It includes verifying identity to access applications and resources. If the user has the correct credentials, he or she will be granted access to the resources. Otherwise, he or she would be denied. So that's what Microsoft Entra ID does. It does the authentication job. Single sign-on, which enables us to remember only one username and one password to access multiple applications, like we use Gmail or Facebook to sign in on multiple websites. So that's what Microsoft Entra ID does as well. So we can use Microsoft Entra ID as single sign-on multiple devices on multiple portals. Also, guys, Microsoft Entra ID helps in application management. We can manage our cloud and on-prem applications by using Microsoft Entra ID. And just like I told you, that if we have devices on our on-prem data center, we can connect those devices. We can add and manage and register all those devices on Microsoft Entra ID. And then we can manage all those devices from Microsoft Entra. So if we have Active Directory on our on-prem data center, we can connect our Active Directory to Microsoft Entra ID. And it enables consistent identity experience between cloud and on-prem data centers. So we can connect our on-prem devices with our Microsoft Entra Cloud IAM. Apart from that, guys, Microsoft Entra ID also provides domain services. From domain service, I mean domain join, group policy, and Kerberos authentication, which is a network authentication type. By the way, if you are not a Linux guy, I I totally understand that these are most of the times managed by Azure guys, Azure administrators, and Microsoft Windows administrator. So in this Azure Fundamentals course, we must have the idea about domain services. Domain services can be domain join, group policy, and Kerberos authentication. When a domain joins a domain group, it becomes the part of that domain. And virtual machine gains access to shared files, printers, and other network resources managed by the domain controller. So Microsoft Entra ID also offers domain services. From domain services, I mean to say domain join, group policy, authentication like Kerberos authentication. When a virtual machine joins a domain, everything on that domain becomes accessible for that virtual machine. You got it? So we create a domain where we share files, where we can share data, and those files and data can be accessed by multiple users at one time. So that is what the purpose of domain services. But before that, we have to create a domain service, and then we can use domain join to join that domain. So you must have a question in your mind that how we can connect our on-prem Active Directory with the domain service or with Microsoft Entra ID. Now you can see here Microsoft Entra ID is playing a central role. It is combining our on-prem devices, our on-prem infrastructure with the cloud. So here you can see I have on-prem Active Directory where my users are added, like users, passwords, and multiple identities. So whenever there is a change, whenever there is any modification, that is actually synced together. Now you can see the arrow is on both sides. So whatever changes happen here, they are automatically synced. Microsoft Entra Connect Sync. With the help of that, our information is continuously synced with Microsoft Entra ID. And now here we have this managed domain, and every information is updated here on our Azure cloud account. Now you can understand from here that we have users, groups, and passwords and IDs that are continuously synced with Microsoft Entra ID. And then Microsoft Entra ID get all those informations, and our information is updated in our managed domain. It ensures identity consistency across on-prem and cloud environments. So that is the purpose of Microsoft Entra ID, which ensures that the records, the data that we have on our on-prem devices, on on-prem data center is continuously synced and updated on our cloud environment. So Microsoft Entra ID plays a crucial and central role to update data from our on-prem data center to our cloud environment. So that's it guys for today's lecture. We are going to discuss more about authentication methods in Azure in our chapter number 9. If you have any confusion, if you have any feedback or suggestions, make sure to leave them in the comments below, and we are going to complete this course as soon as possible. Make sure that you subscribe DevOps Molvi. Have a good one. Bye. Hey guys, I hope you're doing great today. This is our chapter number 9 of our Azure Fundamentals course, AZ-900, and we are going to discuss about Azure authentication methods. Guys, before we proceed, I have a great news for you. Yesterday, I got a free voucher from Microsoft for Azure Fundamentals. So I just gave a try and I passed the AZ-900 fundamental exam. So if you are following me on this course, I hope that you are going to pass your AZ-900 fundamentals certification. So this would be our chapter number 9, and there are total of 13 chapters. So we are just 4 chapters away for completing our Azure Fundamentals course. And today the topic is really simple. We are going to discuss the Azure authentication methods. So before we proceed, make sure that you have subscribed DevOps Molvi. Let's get started with the headline of today's chapter, that Azure supports multiple authentication methods like passwords, single sign-on, MFA, multi-factor authentication, and passwordless authentication. So these are 4 major authentication methods that are supported in Azure Cloud. And we are going to discuss each authentication method one by one. So first of all, we must know what is authentication. Authentication, in simple words, you are doing authentication on a daily basis. How? When you start your system, you open the browser, you write gmail.com. Gmail.com asks you for your username, abc@gmail.com, and your password. Now you are authenticating yourself with the Gmail servers. Okay, so that's how we are doing authentication on a daily basis. We are signing in on different platforms, we are signing in on different portals like portal.azure.com. It will also ask me for the credentials. Those credentials are actually authenticated with Azure Active Directory. So this is the process in which we verify the identity. We verify our identity. So authentication is the process of verifying the identity of a user, device, or entity before granting them access to a system or resource. For instance, if I have a virtual machine running on Azure and you want to log in to that virtual machine, so what do you need to log in to that Azure virtual machine? You need a username like root or Ubuntu. For example, if it's a Ubuntu Linux virtual machine. And also you need a password, the username and the password. Now, if you enter the correct username and password, you are authenticated to log into that virtual machine. That is a simple practice. I hope that this does not need more explanation. The system then verifies the user's identity by checking credentials like passwords, biometric data, fingerprint, facial recognition. Now, these credentials are stored somewhere in any database, okay? And if my credentials that I enter match with the credentials that are stored in the database, then I would definitely be authenticated to log in to that website. And for instance, if the username and password do not match, then I get permission denied or incorrect username or incorrect password. So I have shared this a really common example of logging into a website with username and password. Now, this is the most basic type of authentication. It is known as password authentication, which is our next slide. Standard password authentication, the most common way of authentication by giving the username and password. The user enters the username and password into the application or into the website. The website or app checks the credentials and matches that the user has entered the correct credentials. If the credentials are matched, the user is granted access. So it means that I can log in to that website. And if the credentials do not match, my access would not be granted and I will get that incorrect username or the password does not match. Now, what is single sign on? This is the second authentication method, and now it is observed in every IT company because you are going to use one credential to log in on multiple websites. Like, for instance, if I know my facebook.com credentials, I can use facebook.com credentials to log in, to sign up, or to sign in on multiple platforms, on multiple users. So in the example, I would like to share the CapCut. I use CapCut for video and audio editing. So I log into CapCut via Facebook. So Facebook here is single sign-on. So single sign-on is an authentication method which allows users to access multiple applications and websites with a single set of credentials. So you don't have to remember multiple credentials for multiple websites. Now you need to remember the credentials for gmail.com, your Gmail, like we can use Gmail credentials or Google credentials to log in on drive.google.com or youtube.com, gmail.com, maps.google.com. So now here my Google credentials, like I have shared the example, is a single sign-on. Similarly, I can use facebook.com credentials to log in or to sign up on multiple portals. So this is known as single sign-on. You don't have to remember multiple credentials. You have to remember facebook.com or gmail.com credentials, so you can use those credentials to log in, to sign in on multiple portals. And now additional layer of security. You saw that we started with the standard password authentication, which is very less secure. And then we used single sign-on. After that, now we are going to enhance our security and we are going to use multi-factor authentication. And it is also known as two-factor authentication. Why it is known as two-factor authentication? Because it enhances the security instead of relying only on the passwords. And also when we enable multi-factor authentication, not only we use username and password to enter, we also need to enter the code that is sent to another device like mobile phone. Microsoft Authenticator is used to generate time-based codes. Okay, when I enable multi-factor authentication, I would have to add my mobile device, and that mobile device should have an application like Microsoft Authenticator. And after that, when I log in to any portal, after entering username and password, I would need to enter the code that I will get from Microsoft Authenticator app. So this is an additional layer of security, and that's why it is known as multi-factor authentication, because you have to enter the code that you receive on your mobile device, on your authenticator app. So that's why most of the times you have to install it on your mobile devices like Duo Push app or Google Authenticator or Microsoft Authenticator. These applications are used to generate time-based codes, and we need to enter those codes to log in to any portal, to any application. And also, guys, for your information, we have to enable first. We have to enable MFA first. And when multi-factor authentication is enabled, we have to add our mobile device from where we are going to use the codes. And after that, guys, we have Microsoft Entra multi-factor authentication, and it works the same way just like we have multi-factor authentication, where we receive the code on our authenticator app or via SMS or via a phone call. So Microsoft Entra multi-factor authentication works the same way, and Microsoft Entra multi-factor authentication enables users to choose an additional form of authentication during sign-in, such as a phone call. You will receive a phone call and the code would be shared on that phone call. Or mobile app notification, you can get a push notification with any code. Then you have to enter your code to sign in to Azure or Azure portal. And after that, guys, we have passwordless authentication. What is passwordless authentication? As the name says, where we do not need to enter the password. It is known as passwordless authentication. Passwordless authentication is a method of verifying a user's identity without requiring a password. Now, if we do not need to enter the password, then what credentials are needed? We need biometrics like fingerprint, facial recognition, voice recognition. These are the best examples of passwordless authentication. Passwordless authentication needs to be set up on a device before it can work. Once enrolled, you will never have to use a password. Like, guys, if you are using passwordless biometric banking, okay, and you go to an ATM, you do not enter the card, ATM card. Instead, you use your finger, your thumb, and then your authentication is done. But before that, you have to enroll your biometrics. You have to enroll your thumb. You have to enroll your facial recognition. And once my biometrics are enrolled, then I can use those biometrics to authenticate on any device, on any portal. All right, guys, now this example is a perfect illustration to know which authentication method is more convenient and secure. So you can see that we have high security, we have convenience, we have inconvenience, and we have low security. Now you can see that passwordless authentication is the most convenient and highly secure method. Okay, and if we talk about low security, then just like we discussed, that standard password authentication is convenient, but its security is very low. Passwords can be brute force attacked, password can be leaked. So in order to secure your account, we must use passwordless authentication, and also it is more convenient as well. But if you want to use passwords plus two-factor authentication, it is highly secure, but it is inconvenient. So the final conclusion is that we must use passwordless authentication, which is highly secure, and also it is really convenient. You just have to enter your thumb, you have to give your facial recognition or voice recognition, and then you can be signed in or log in. After that, guys, we have Azure external identities. Now, what is an external identity? An external identity is a person, device, service that is outside your organization. And external identities are used to collaborate with partners, distributors, suppliers, or vendors. External identities are used by the developers who create consumer facing applications. These are identities that do not belong to your organization. These can be your partners, the distributors, or any third party applications. So we need to create Azure external identities, and then we can use those external identities to collaborate with our business partners, with our IT distributors or vendors or suppliers. Since the suppliers, vendors, and partners do not belong to our organization, instead of creating their account on our Azure portal, we just need to create an external identity so that we can collaborate with them. All right, guys, that's it for today's lecture. We have covered almost all the authentication methods that are used in Azure, like standard password authentication, single sign-on, multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentication, and passwordless authentication. And we found that passwordless authentication is more convenient and highly secure. Which one do you use? Make sure that you must let me know in the comments. I will see you in the chapter number 10 of Azure Security. Make sure that you have subscribed DevOps Molvi. Have a good one and bye. Hey guys, I hope you're doing great today. This is our chapter number 10, in which we are going to discuss one of the most important topics, and it is about Azure security. Guys, you know that every IT company or every IT organization is concerned about security, whether it's about network security or data security or your infrastructure security. Security plays a crucial role everywhere. We know that. And therefore, Azure also provides security tools so that we can securely manage and build our resources on Azure Cloud. So this would be our chapter number 10. And before we proceed, make sure that you have subscribed DevOps Molvi. Let's get started with today's headline. And it is about Azure being the highly secure cloud platform. Okay, Azure is highly secure cloud platform with a focus to protect our data through every means, and it's all about our data protection. So it means that Azure is highly secure cloud platform and it protects our information, it protects our data. Whatever we build would be secure. So first of all, guys, talking about security, we must know about RBAC. RBAC stands for Role-Based Access Control. And RBAC is used everywhere. We have RBAC roles in Kubernetes. We have RBAC in Google Cloud Platform and also in AWS. RBAC stands for Role-Based Access Control, and it helps us to manage who has access to Azure resources, what they can do with those resources, and what areas they have access to. That is the purpose of role-based access. And with the help of RBAC, we assign specific roles to the users. For instance, I am a DevOps engineer and I must have access to the Azure virtual machines. So there would be a role of maybe admin role that can be assigned to my user. And after that, I would be able to create new virtual machines or modify the current virtual machines. That's what a role does. And a role definition is a collection of permissions. So it means that I would have the permissions to create, to modify, to delete virtual machines. Now, it depends on my administrator, my senior administrator, who is assigning a role to my user, right? Are you getting my point? For instance, let me share another example. If a DevOps intern, Azure DevOps intern joins our company, and after he or she joins the company, we are giving him or her the role, only read role to view our cloud resources like virtual machine on our Azure cloud. So a read role would be assigned with the help of Azure RBAC, and after that, that user would be only able to view the virtual machines on our Azure cloud. So that's what role does. So we can have read role, edit role, administrator role. Admin role is the most powerful role. For instance, if my user has administrator access, I can do whenever I want. I can create new virtual machines. I can terminate virtual machines. I can modify virtual machines if I have admin role. So a role definition is a collection of permissions. A role is the collection of permissions, and those permissions can be read, write, and delete that can be performed. So if a user has all those permissions, It means that that user can view the resources, can modify or terminate the resources. Azure RBAC has over 120 built-in roles. We can create our own custom roles. So whenever we create an account on Azure, we get around 100 plus 120 to be exact built-in roles that we can use for security. But if I want to have custom roles created, I can do as well. So that is what RBAC, role-based access, and a role consists of certain permissions like read permissions, edit permissions, delete permissions. We can create the role with these permissions and we can assign those roles to any user we want. After that, guys, how is role-based access control applied to resources? That should be a question in your mind, that if I am a user, DevOps Molvi, and how our back is going to assign to my user. So role-based access control is applied to a scope, which is a resource or set of resources that this access applies to. Now, there is another term we are going to discuss, and it is scope. So it means that a role-based access control or RBAC is applied to a scope, and a scope can be a resource or a set of resources. Now from here, it would be more convenient to understand that you can see a scope can be on the left. You can see a scope can be a management group, a subscription, a resource group, or a resource. Now, this is the definition of scope. I have also a dedicated slide on scope, but for now, you must have this concept clear that a scope can be a management group, a scope can be a subscription, a scope can be a resource group, or a scope can be a resource like virtual machine, right? So we can assign these roles. Now you can see I have defined the roles like reader role or a custom resource specific role, custom role, contributor, or administrator like owner role. We can assign all these roles to the scopes. Now guys, there is one important concept, and also this is a use case of having roles. For instance, if I have an admin role and I attach this admin role to a management group, so by default or automatically, all the subscriptions, resource groups, and resources within that management group will have that admin role. Let me repeat it again. If I attach administrator role to any management group, and when I apply that role, it means that everything underneath that management group will have automatically the admin role with every resource, with every subscription, with every resource group. I hope that you got my point. So that's why roles can be used. We can attach roles to the management group. We can attach roles to the subscription. We can attach roles to the resource group. And if we talk about the lowest hierarchy, I can attach directly it to a virtual machine or virtual network or database. So in short, a scope can be a management group, a subscription resource group, or a resource. We can attach read, write, custom role, or owner role, administrator role to any scope at any given time. Now, what is a scope? In Azure, a scope defines the level at which a policy, permission, or action is applied or enforced, ranging from a single resource to a management group. That's what we have discussed in the previous slide, that a resource can be a virtual machine, a resource can be a storage account, a resource can be a subscription. So all these resources can be considered as scopes, or a scope can be a management group. A scope can be a single resource, resource group, subscription, or management group. Now guys, what is zero trust model? And it is simply explained as never trust, always verify. And also I have shared the example that we always verify a call received by an unknown number, right? This is true. So we don't trust, we need a verification. In Azure, the zero trust model operates on the principle of never trust, always verify. That means that we should not trust any user. We should not trust any employee of that same IT organization. He or she should verify himself or herself before accessing the resources on our cloud. So that's why every access request is treated as potentially hostile, requiring strict verification and authorization even for internal users and resources. It does not mean that if I am the employee of any IT company and I don't need to verify myself. No, that's not the case. We have to. We have to verify. We have to identify ourselves because Azure has zero trust model, because Azure does not trust us, and we have to prove our identification. We have to prove ourselves that we have the correct credentials to view or to access those resources. So that's what zero trust model is. And guys, talking about security, this is one of the most simplest and important diagrams, and it is offered by Azure. That's how, because they want to show us that how they are securing our information, how they are protecting our data. Now you can see there are a number of layers here, and here's our data running our application, etc. The objective of defense in depth is to protect information through every means. And it means that Azure makes sure our data is protected, our information is secure through every means. Physical security, like boundary walls of data center, identity and access of the employees who are working there, and perimeter building. So the network security, firewall, security groups, compute resources security, and then we have our application running on those compute resources, and after that we have data. Now you can see there can be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 layers. Then our data is accessible. And guys, after that we have Microsoft Defender for cloud. Just like we have antivirus installed on our system, I would like to share the basic example. What does that antivirus do? It protects our system from threats, from viruses. It keeps an eye on every malicious file, on every executable file. Our antivirus detects that that certain file could harm our system. It removes it. It potentially removes all the threats that our system can face later. So that's what Microsoft Defender for Cloud does. It is a monitoring tool for security posture management and threat protection. It means that it protects our systems, our virtual machines, our data, our application from any external threats. It monitors our cloud, on premises, hybrid, and multi cloud environments. It also provides guidance and notifications aimed at strengthening our security posture. It means that it gives us suggestions how we can improve the security of our cloud environment. And not only we can monitor our Azure cloud, we can also monitor hybrid, on-prem, and multi-cloud environments using Microsoft Defender. So in short, Microsoft Defender is a monitoring tool, and it is used to protect our system for malicious threats. It protects our cloud environment for any external threats. And guys, Microsoft Defender works on these three mechanisms. The first is assessment. Second is security, and then defense. So first of all, continuously assess. It means that continuous monitoring. It knows our security posture. It always keeps identifying and tracking vulnerabilities. Continuous assessment of all our cloud resources. And then it secures our resources and services with Azure Security Benchmark. And after that, if there are any threats, it defends and resolves all those threats that our resources can face, that our workloads can face on our Azure or on-prem or hybrid cloud environments. So it means that Microsoft Defender continuously assesses our resources. It continuously keeps an eye for any security breaches, any security leaks, and if there are any security problems, it fixes them as well. And also, it defends our workloads, our data against any malicious threats. Continuous assessment, continuous security, and defense. So, Microsoft Defender works on these three principles, I must say: assess, secure, and defend. I hope that you have a clear concept of assessment, security, and defense. And that's it for today, guys. I hope that you have a clear understanding of Azure security. It was just a basic overview of Azure security and how role-based access work, how Microsoft Defender monitors our resources, and we are going to deep dive in our upcoming lectures about Azure security. Azure security is the one of the most important fields. If you want to have a security specialty in Azure, I would strongly recommend it. I will see you in the next chapter of Azure cost management. Make sure that you subscribe DevOps Molvi, and we are just 3 chapters away for completing our Azure AZ-900 fundamentals course. See you. Have a good one. Bye. All right, guys. I hope you're doing great today. This is our chapter number 11, and we are going to learn about Azure cost management. Guys, we have covered 10 chapters so far. Each chapter is really important if you are preparing yourself for the AZ-900 exam, because there can be around 60 questions in the exam or 40 in AZ fundamentals, and every area is covered. From the area, I mean that you can get questions from compute services, storage services, identity and access management, and also from security, Azure security that we discussed in the previous chapter, from cost management. You have to tell the best possible solution, and those questions are actually scenario based as well. So make sure that you do not skip any chapter, and this would be a complete preparation course. In today's lecture, we are going to discuss about cost management tools. We are really concerned about our infrastructure costs, and those costs should be minimum as much as possible. So how can we reduce our infrastructure costs? There are certain tools in Azure. We are going to discuss them one by one. And before proceeding, make sure that you have subscribed DevOps Molvi. I really appreciate your support. So today's headline is: Azure Cost Management is a suite of free tools within the Azure portal which helps us monitor, manage, and optimize our cloud spending. From cloud spending, I mean cloud expenses, cloud expenditure, infrastructure expenses. So, how we can manage, monitor, and optimize our cloud expenses. Azure cost management helps us to achieve that goal. And now let's proceed. But first, we must know about Azure cost management. What is Azure cost management? The cost management is a set of FinOps tools. FinOps tools mean financial operation tools, those tools that are relevant with the finance of the company. Cost management is a set of FinOps tools that enables us to analyze, manage, and optimize the infrastructure costs. So, what would be our monthly spending? What would be the total budget? How we can reduce our infrastructure budget? How we can efficiently optimize our monthly infrastructure costs? So, that is actually the cost management. It is designed to give visibility into where our money is going. It also helps to forecast the future costs. Like we are going through May 2025, and I can predict the future costs of June 2025. What would be the costs? So most of the times there is a little up and down in the infrastructure cost. If our infrastructure remains the same throughout a year, if we want to deploy more virtual machines, more clusters, then we can get the cost estimates as well with the help of Azure Cost Management. Set spending limits for your subscriptions, resource groups, or services. And also, we can get alerts when you're approaching or exceeding the budget. For instance, if I have a budget of $100, let's say per month, and I don't want to exceed that budget, so I can set alerts in cost management. And when this budget is exceeded or it will hit the threshold, then I must get an alert that you are going to hit your budget limit. Make sure that you check out your infrastructure, your costs, so we can set the budget. We can also set the limits on each subscription, on each resource group, so that those subscriptions or resource group should not cross the certain cost limit. So all of that can be done in Azure Cost Management. So what could be the cost factors in any cloud environment? By the way, it is not limited to Azure. If you're an AWS engineer, if you are working or managing AWS cloud environment or GCP or Oracle Cloud, we can have the following cost factors. Number one, resource type. Micro virtual machine would cost a little amount per month. But if I'm going to spin up an extra large virtual machine with 32 GB of RAM and 16 vCPUs, then definitely my infrastructure or monthly cost would be high. And also consumption, pay as you go. And traffic, bandwidth, monthly traffic affects our costs. And geography, the costs varies according to the regions. Maybe a virtual machine that is costing me in Indian region $5 a month, but the same virtual machine may cost me 7 or $8 per month in Brazil or Singapore or Hong Kong. So the region change can also affect our costs. And also subscription tie. This is also a cost factor. If I'm going to use free subscription, I would not get any costs. And if it is a pay as you go, which is the most common subscription, pay as you go, pay for the resources that we use. And also, if we are going to buy any application, third party software from Azure Marketplace, Azure Solutions, then these are actually the costs that are added into a monthly spending. Okay, resource type, virtual machines or blob container, storage, clusters, etc. And consumption, if we are running our virtual machines 24/7, then obviously my cost would be high. The bandwidth, more bandwidth means more cost. And geographical locations also affect subscription types and Azure Marketplace. If I am purchasing a solution from any third party vendor or service provider, I have to pay an additional cost. So these are actually the major cost factors, and these cost factors impact our monthly or yearly costs. So how can I estimate my costs in Azure? I have a tool. Azure provides a tool which is known as Azure Pricing Calculator. And just like we use calculator to calculate our budgets, our spendings, we can use Azure Pricing Calculator to calculate our cloud spending, our cloud budget, our cloud costs of services like virtual machines, storage, databases, and more. We can also select different Azure regions to see how location affects pricing. You have to keep in mind that location affects the prices. So for instance, if I am spinning up a large virtual machine, that virtual machine will have different costs in different regions. The costs varies according to the regions. And also Azure Pricing Calculator provides us with the information that is needed to make informed decisions about moving workloads to Azure. So for instance, if I'm planning any migrations to Azure, I must use Azure pricing calculator so that I can get an estimate of the future costs that we can incur after the migrations, and I can send this report to my management, my DevOps manager, that these would be costs if we migrate our infrastructure, our solutions to Azure. So Azure pricing calculator helps a lot to estimate the costs. And also, guys, we have Azure TCO calculator, which stands for total cost of ownership. Azure TCO calculator. It is different as compared to Azure pricing calculator. It is used for businesses to estimate the potential cost savings and benefits of migrating their on-prem workloads to Azure cloud platform. If there is a large IT organization with hundreds or thousands of virtual machines and storage and networks, and that organization is planning to migrate to move towards Azure. So, Azure TCO, total cost of ownership, will help that business to get a monthly cost estimate. So, Azure TCO, total cost of ownership calculator, is specially designed for businesses to get the cost estimates so that they can easily migrate their infrastructure from on-prem to Azure. We can also compare the cost of our workload running on on-prem data center with Azure. If we are getting so much discounts, so much low costs, then we definitely move to Azure from our on-prem infrastructure. We don't need an Azure subscription to work with the TCO calculator. It means that TCO calculator is always free. We don't need any pay-as-you-go or free subscription to get the estimate of costs. And Azure TCO calculator is extensively used by businesses to get an infrastructure cost estimate. So that's it, guys. It was a little short and sweet lecture, but we have discussed the core concept of Azure cost management, cost factor, Azure pricing calculator, and Azure total cost of ownership TCO calculator to get an estimate of our future costs, monthly spendings, or we can optimize our costs using Azure cost management tools. So in the next chapter, which would be our chapter number 12 and second last chapter of Azure AZ-900 fundamentals course, and it is about Azure governance and compliance. Make sure that you stay tuned with this playlist to get AZ-900 certified. I will see you in the next chapter. Have a good one. Bye. Hey guys, I hope you're doing great today. This is our second last chapter of our Azure Fundamentals course, AZ-900, and that would be our second last chapter, and just we have only one chapter remaining, and we are going to cover it as soon as possible. So guys, in this chapter, we are going to discuss about Azure governance and compliance, and two or three services that are relevant to Azure governance and compliance. So without further ado, let's get started and make sure that you have subscribed DevOps Molvi. I really appreciate your support. So guys, Azure governance and compliance, what is the purpose of it? What is Azure governance and compliance do for the companies, for large IT companies that are really sensitive about their information, about the data? So Azure governance and compliance, if we have our infrastructure on Azure, these services help organizations ensure their cloud resources align with industry standards and organizational policies. I will give you a really common example. If you buy cooking oil, okay, or if you buy any grocery item, you can go through the label, you can go through the product information, and you will find about that product has ISO 9000, ISO 10,000 certified, etc. So a number of standards are written on the box, on the label, on the packet, that this product is built according to these standards. this product aligns with these ISO, which is International Standards Organization. And companies explicitly mention that our product is built according to these international standards. So it is needed to gain the customer's trust. Okay. So that's why Azure governance and compliance also help organization so that all of their cloud resources, their infrastructure is built according to the industry standards. Okay. And there are organizational policies we can define and we can use Azure policies. What is an Azure policy? We are going to discuss it later. But first, what is Microsoft Purview? Okay, this service is known as Microsoft Purview, and it is a solution for organizations to govern, to monitor, to protect, and manage their data across various resources. Now, this is an important governance service in Azure, which is used to govern, to babysit, to look after, and also to protect and manage our data across multiple sources. And also, it protects sensitive data across clouds, applications, and devices. Guys, in IT organization, a single data breach can cost companies millions of dollars. So that's why almost every company, every software development company is really concerned about their data. Now, data is money. Data is your business. Okay. So, in this modern IT era, I would say that data is everything. And therefore, companies invest a lot of money to protect, to govern their data. And luckily, if we have our infrastructure, if we have our data and information on Azure, we can use these services to protect and to monitor and to govern our data. So Microsoft Purview is one of the governance and compliance service. Okay, I hope that now you understand it. Identify data risk. Now, this is actually the major benefit of Microsoft Purview. It identifies where your data is getting risk, where your data could be leaked. Okay, your information could be leaked to the public, and Microsoft Purview identifies data risks and manage regulatory compliance requirements. And also, guys, we can get started with regulatory compliance about our data, about our information, about our policies using Microsoft Purview. So that was just a brief overview of Microsoft Purview. We must know that it is used to govern and protect and manage our data across multiple sources, and it also protect our sensitive information across multiple clouds, applications, and devices. Now, what is Azure Policy? Azure Policy is an Azure service to create and manage Azure policies. And now it brings us to another question, that what is an Azure policy? So Azure policy is a set of rules. A policy is generally created with a set of rules. And a number of rules, if combined together, will form a policy. And in Azure, if we combine multiple rules, it becomes an Azure policy. And we have, on top of that, Azure Policy Service, which is used to manage and monitor and create hundreds of Azure policies. A policy is a set of rules about the resources should be like and what actions to take if they are not compliant. Now, for instance, if I am the DevOps lead and I create a policy that each Azure instance should have SSH port as 8899 instead of 22. We are changing our SSH port for all Azure instances. Now, I can define this rule and I can create an Azure policy according to that so that we can protect our SSH port. So that's how we can create rules, and then we can define a policy that combines all those rules. A policy can be assigned to a resource group, subscription, or management group. Now, if I attach a policy to a management group, it means that resources, resource groups, subscriptions under that management group will inherit that policy by default. So that is also one of the core purposes of policies. We can apply one single policy to a management group, and then all the resources, resource groups, and subscription will inherit the policy, will inherit all the rules that are defined in that specific policy. So that is the one of the shortest way to attach a certain rule, certain number of rules to a policy, and then we can attach that policy to a management group. The policies in Azure are created in JSON. JSON language is used to create Azure policies. Azure policy is a set of rules. Those rules are defined to create a policy. We can then use that policy with resources, subscriptions, and management groups. So guys, now resource logs, and resource log is simple. Just like if we lock our door, I will just share a simple and basic example that if I lock the door of my room, it means that nobody can enter in my room. My room is locked for everyone. So that's why resource logs are used to prevent resources from being accidentally deleted or changed. If I log a resource, it means that now this resource cannot be deleted or terminated or even modified. So that is why it is known as resource logs. Resource can be a virtual machine. Okay. If I log a virtual machine, now none of my team members or colleagues would be able to delete or modify that virtual machine. So that is known as resource logs. Resource are getting logged. Okay. Resource logs can be applied to individual resources. Just like I shared the example of virtual machine, resource groups, we can apply a resource log to a group, and we can also apply or log our subscription. And we can also manage resource log from our Azure portal, PowerShell, or with Azure CLI. So that's how we can manage and create resource logs. All right, guys, now finally we have Service Trust Portal, and we can access the Service Trust Portal from this URL. Now let's see what is it. And I just opened it, and we get everything about certifications, standards, regulations on Service Trust Portal. So we can access it from servicetrust.microsoft.com. And now you can see here certifications, regulations, and standards. Now, each certification, ISO International Standard Organization, regulations, systems and organization control, SOC, General Data Protection Regulation, and FedRAMP, PCI compliant, CSA, every standard, regulations, and certifications are mentioned on this Service Trust portals. Now you can see reports, white papers, and artifacts. So this is actually for general knowledge. So you must check it out. For instance, if I click on PCI compliant, so PCI, the payment card industry. Now it is one of the most frequently used regulations, or I can say a standard which is used by the fintechs, like banking industry. So the payment card industry data security standards is a global information security designed to prevent fraud through increased control of credit card data. And also, guys, you can see here organizations of all sizes must follow PCI DSS standards. If they accept payment cards from 5 major card brands like Visa, MasterCard, American Express, Discover, and Japan Credit Bureau. So, guys, if you're using Visa or MasterCard, it means that your bank or your fintech is actually following the PCI DSS standards. So that's how we can go through these standards from servicetrust.microsoft.com, and more details about all the standards about regulations are mentioned on this trust portal. So that's it for today's lecture, guys. We have covered Azure governance and compliance. We must have a general knowledge and overview of Azure governance and compliance. I will see you in our next last lecture of Azure AZ-900 fundamentals course. Make sure that you subscribe, and I wish you best of luck for your AZ-900 fundamentals exam. I hope that my course will definitely help you out. I will see you in the next lecture, which would be our last lecture of AZ-900 fundamentals. Have a good one. Bye. Hey guys, I hope you're doing great today. Well, this is our last chapter of our AZ-900 fundamentals course. We have done a great job together, and we have covered a lot of Azure concepts. And one of the concepts that still remains is Azure monitoring. So we are going to quickly cover it in today's lecture, and this would be our last lecture. In Azure monitoring, we are going to discuss about the important services that are used to monitor our infrastructure running on Azure. So let's get started, and make sure that you have subscribed DevOps Molvi. I really appreciate your support, because with the help of your support, we are going to cover our next certification, which is Azure Administrator Associate. So let's get started. And what is Azure monitoring? Azure monitoring tools are aimed to detect and monitor issues in applications or infrastructures. For instance, we have hundreds of virtual machines running on Azure. How we can detect if any of those virtual machines is facing any performance issues, network latency issues, hard disk issues, etc. So with the help of Azure monitoring tools, we can monitor, we can manage the performance of our resources on Azure. All right, so first one is Azure Advisor. What is Azure Advisor? Azure Advisor is designed to help you save time on cloud optimization. Azure Advisor, just as the name says, it advises, it gives us a couple of advices how we can optimize our cloud resources on Azure. It also makes recommendations. It recommends the best approaches that we must use to optimize our cloud infrastructure on Azure. So those recommendations are used to help improve reliability, security, and performance. And also, we can use Azure Advisor to achieve operational excellence and reduce costs. So, for instance, if I'm going to migrate my on-prem infrastructure on Azure, I must use Azure Advisor so that I can efficiently migrate and manage my infrastructure on Azure with minimum costs. Okay, so that's why we must use Azure Advisor, because it recommends the best approaches to protect, to secure, to reliably build infrastructure on Azure. So Azure Advisor is one of the most frequently used monitoring service in Azure. Just like you can see in this snapshot that I have attached, you can see we have reliability, we have security, performance, operational excellence, and costs. So Azure Advisor is sharing us recommendations. Now, there are actually 31 total recommendations how we can improve the security of our infrastructure, how we can make it more reliable, because there are 4 recommendations: performance is already good, and we have operational excellence, one recommendation, cost, three recommendations. How we can reduce our cost, how we can secure our infrastructure, how we can make it more reliable. So these are actually recommendations that Azure Advisor recommends us. So we must follow those recommendations, or at least we must check out what are the recommendations, and we must follow all those recommendations so that we have 100% secure and reliable and with minimal costs of our infrastructure. Just like we have three recommendations, and now we can see that one is high impact. So we must take a quick action on this recommendation so we can reduce our cost. We have 20 high impact recommendations regarding security. So that's how we can improve. And once everything is good, Azure will let us know that you are following all of our performance recommendations. You are following all of our security recommendations. You are following all of our reliability and cost recommendations. So for now, I am being lazy. I have performance good, but I have to work on security, reliability, and cost recommendations. So this is what Azure Advisor used for. You can see I have Advisor. We can have recommendations of high availability, security, performance, cost, operational excellence, and we can click on all recommendations to see all the recommendations. Also, we can download in the form of a CSV or as PDF files so that I can share with my team. And by the way, guys, sorry, I can also create an alert, create advisor alerts to get notified for the new recommendations. If I want to be notified with the new recommendations from Azure Advisor, I can create alerts for it. All right, now what is Azure Service Health? Service Health provides a personalized view of the health of Azure services and regions we are using, whether they are healthy or any degradation, any performance outage. We can use Azure Service Health to get a view, personalized view of the health of Azure services, whether every service is operational and it is in good health. Azure Service Health notifies about Azure Service incidents, like if there is any performance outage, network degradation, and also about planned maintenance, so we can take action to mitigate the downtime. Azure status is a broad picture of the status of Azure globally. We can go to Azure status and we can see that whether our region is fully operational, it is fully functional. So these are all Azure services, and these are for us, for customers like us, so that we can monitor, we can watch our infrastructure running on Azure, whether it is fully operational or if there are any downtimes or any maintenance or any performance issues. So these are services like Azure Service Health, Azure Status that we can use. After that, guys, we have Azure Monitor, and it is also Azure Monitoring Services. Just like the name says, Azure Monitor is used to monitor our resources on Azure. It collects, analyzes, and visualizes the data. Okay, I have worked in the monitoring department in my remote job, and I was in service health department where our core responsibilities was to monitor and manage servers running in production. All of those servers were Linux, and we were using a couple of tools to monitor and manage the services running on those servers. All those servers were using Linux operating system, and we were getting data, we were getting packet loss, etc., any latency issues, any performance issues, any hardware degradation. So that is actually a site reliability engineering type of role, where your responsibility is to keep the services and servers 100% up. You have to ensure that your servers are giving 100% of uptime, and that's why we must use Azure Monitor to monitor our virtual machines and other resources running on Azure. We can have the ability to monitor multi-cloud resources like virtual machines hosted with a different cloud provider like AWS. So that is actually a good news for a company which is using multi-cloud platforms like Google Cloud, AWS, or Oracle Cloud, and we can monitor the infrastructure on those cloud platforms with the help of Azure Monitor. So it means that Azure Monitor is just not limited to Azure only. We can manage, we can monitor other infrastructure using this Azure monitoring service. We can view high-level reports on the Azure Monitor dashboard, and alerts are automatically triggered on certain critical conditions by Azure Monitor alerts. For instance, if a virtual machine goes down, we must configure alerts for every service down, for every VM down. Okay, if a VM goes down or service, critical service like web service, Nginx, MySQL, if they go down, we must have alerts, and we must receive those alerts with the help of Azure Monitor. We must take a quick action so that our performance is not impacted with the downtime. Now, guys, you can see here, this is a broad picture of Azure Monitor. Now, Azure Monitor is playing a central role. It is collecting metrics, logs, and traces from devices, infrastructure, Azure, and other sources, resources like virtual machines, Blob containers, and that metrics, logs, and traces are manipulated into experiences. The data is visualized, the data is analyzed, and we can respond according to the data, alerts, and actions. We can autoscale virtual machines. We can integrate those traces, those metrics with other applications. So you can see Azure Monitor collects the data from workloads which are running on Azure, infrastructure running on Azure or other cloud platforms like AWS and GCP. Once the data is collected with Azure Monitor, Azure Monitor then visualizes the data. It also lets us know that this data is coming from containers, from virtual machines, from networks, from storage accounts. And also we can visualize the data with the help of dashboards, workbooks, or Power BI, or the most important monitoring tool like Grafana. After that, we can analyze the data. We can analyze the log with log analytics. And if there are anything critical, we can create alerts and we can respond to those alerts. And then we can also integrate our metrics and traces with our applications or event hubs. And you can see that Azure Monitor plays a critical role between workloads and infrastructure. And that's how we can visualize, we can analyze our data with the help of Azure Monitor. So that's it, guys. And I'm really happy to complete Azure Fundamentals AZ-900 course. And I hope that you will have a better idea about Azure services. We have covered a lot of Azure concepts. And now I'm also on my way to create Azure Administrator Associate course, and I will be uploading it on my YouTube channel. So make sure that you have subscribed DevOps Molvi. I really appreciate your support. And if you find this course helpful, make sure to share it with your friends. And if you have any suggestions, leave them in the comments below. I will see you in the next chapter. Have a good one. Bye.